allegiance, and then remain standing for a moment of silence for all of our servicemen and women who are stationed around the globe protecting our freedoms. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Pelletieri for his superintendent's report.
Thank you, sir, very much. It's always fun, always a buzz in the room when we have our students here to be honored, and we're going to jump right in with that. Have a lot of parents as well. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we recognize some of our student athletes. I'm just going to go, there's no particular order. I'll read them out, call you up, ask you to come up. We'll do a picture at the end, please, too, so don't disappear on us. First person we're going to call up is Carly Sharp. Carly. Carly has earned the 2021 Marge Auster Division I Coach of the Year for varsity field hockey at Sachem North. Great job, Coach. Coach, I coached 7 years girls varsity track. Did I ever tell you that? I just did. I was never Coach of the Year, though. I was never Coach of the Year. Congratulations. Mike Bosco. Suffolk County Coach JV Coach of the Year for boys JV volleyball for Sachem North. Mike, did I tell you I coached girls track for 7 years? Madison Apicella. Madison. Madison, this is like a paragraph. This may take a while here. All County, comma. Division I Offensive Player of the Year, comma. All Long Island, comma. United Soccer Coaches Association, All Region and All State for varsity field hockey. Congratulations. Did I messed. That's my fault. I apologize. Soccer. I knew that. I just spoke to you. Fix that for me, will you, Phil? Caroline Asperu. Caroline. See, now this says field hockey. I'm afraid it's soccer, but your shirt says field hockey, so I know I'm right. See how observant I am? All Long Island, all state varsity field hockey. Congratulations. Amazing. Joe Cruz. Oh, my gosh. Joe Cruz, all academic. All, Joe, stand to the side so people can see me. All county, all Long Island, all state varsity football. Congratulations, Joe. Great job. Joe, where are you going to school? I knew that. Syracuse. Congratulations, buddy. Lauren Lucas. Take your time, Lauren. Don't worry. Are you limping? You all right? Okay. All tournament, comma, another one with a paragraph. Defensive Player of the Year. Nancy Cole Award, 2021 NFHCA High School All Regions Teams. All Long Island, there's still more commas. All state for varsity field hockey. How did you accomplish all this? Hard work. That's right. Do you have anyone to thank here? Great answer. Great answer. Congratulations. Riley McPartland. I went to high school with a guy named Miles McPartland. Is that your uncle? No? All right. I'll give it a shot. All county, all state for girls gymnastics. Congratulations. You want to flip your way back to the seat or anything like that? We can move some tables. You all right? No? Okay. Luke McPherson. Luke? Luke is all county, all Long Island for boys varsity volleyball. Outstanding. Mr. Bauman, that's for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Torgo, would you come here for a second? Ava Malisha. Ava. All academic, all conference, all county, and all state. Is there anything else? All United States, maybe, something like that. All galaxy. Ava, congratulations. Varsity soccer. Oh, another Ava. Ava Grace Monty. All league, all county, all state for girls varsity swimming. Congratulations. Are you, why are you out of the pool right now? Or shouldn't you be in? Are your fingers pruned? Let me see your fingers. Did I prune? A little pruning. All right, all right. How did you become such a good swimmer?
I don't know. I've just been swimming since I was 4.
Oh my God. I was born in the Bronx, so I'm really what's referred to as a non-swimmer. If I fell in, would you save me? Because I visit the schools, right? Are you a lifeguard? You are. All right. That's great. We have a great program at the high schools, right? For lifeguarding. Fantastic. Ava, congratulations.
Thank you.
Michael Ruggiero. No. All conference, all county, all state boys varsity soccer. This Sachem is unbelievable. Mr. Butel, Mr. Torregrossa, coaches, board, really just so proud of our young athletes here, the academics, the hard work on the field, the parents, the coaches, everyone coming together. Again, I always talk about the Sachem family, but I even look at how this is set up with Joe in the middle, how everyone is a perfect picture. Like, we're going to leave, just work that way, right, Joe? You used to being in the middle like that? We're going to just, what position do you play on offensive line? Tackle. Okay. Oh, you want to move over a little bit to the left? You're right there. Okay. Just incredible stuff, Mr. Bauman. That one's for you again also. Just so proud of everyone here. Mr. Butel, did you want to say a word or two, please? No? Yeah, but the coaches, right? Let's recognize some of the coaches that are here, I know.
I just want to say congratulations to all the student athletes here. It's just so great to see you on the fields and the pools, on the courts doing your thing, and our two coaches, being recognized by your peers for Coach of the Year honors is just really a true testament to what you do for us every year, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Also, to our coaches who are here, if you could please come on up for the picture, because we think it's important to show what has gotten these student athletes through your hard work as well.
moms and dads and kids and coaches, you don't have to stay. Certainly you're welcome to. But there is school tomorrow, right? All right, our next piece, we are going to jump in with Mr. O'Keefe and his budget team for our workshop number 4 on budget. Thank you very much. Mr. O'Keefe?
No, thank you, everybody.
Allison, maybe we'll close the door or something for just for a moment. Thank you so much. I know it's supposed to be open.
All right, we'll get going now. So thank you, everybody. This is the presentation number 4 in our series. Just get this thing to work. Hang on one second. There we go. So our next board meeting, March 23rd, will be the 5th and final budget presentation. And then we'll have our budget adoption meeting on April 13th, where the board will adopt the final budget. We have our public hearing on May 4th, and then the budget vote is on May 17th. Over the last several meetings, I've gone through the entire draft proposed budget. If you remember when we first left off, we summed up the total of all the parts. The draft budget was about $358.8 million. The end of that meeting, the board authorized some budget transfers. We utilized some funds that we have on hand this year and repurposed them, as well as utilization of some federal grant dollars to purchase some of the equipment that we actually had into next year's budget. The 22-23 year budget obviously is a heavy lift. Not only are we challenged by a number of financial related things, such as the large increase this year in health insurance and a large TRS increase, but obviously we're also adding the 9th period to our secondary day, so there'll be a large number of staff that'll be added. With that being said, our current revenue budget, and that's not final, of course, because we don't get our final state aid numbers till April 1st. As of this meeting, we still have a $12.1 million variance. So in other words, my draft expenditures exceed my available revenue without utilization of any reserves or fund balance by $12 million. Since I've done this presentation, Mr. Sachs and I have been busy working on a number of different things, things that we've learned since this presentation was done. We do have a certain number of retirements of teachers this year. Those teachers will all be replaced with another FTE, not necessarily in that same location, but there are 14 expected retirements. I would expect to replace all 14 people. The new hires may land in a different location. So that's not part of that 12.1 million. I'm still working through that. As you remember, we added 38 FTEs into the original draft budget for the 9-period day. We're still fine tuning that. We believe that number is going to come down by 10 or so that will be certainly helpful. Obviously, once I balance out all the salaries coming in, then I'll reproject our retirement costs and our other costs like health insurance and FICA, and then I'll get us a little bit closer to where we are. I mean, as I've mentioned to you in board memos, there probably will be a need for utilization of some reserves this year, but they are with purpose. Obviously, we are expanding the budget. We are growing the program across the 5 buildings, so it would be appropriate to utilize those reserves to get us through, considering our state aid increase this year is only going to be about 2%. So I'm just going to go through the whole presentation, and at the end, if you have any questions, we can go through them. I just wanted to give everyone a reminder and a recap of where we have been in the last several years with capital spending. You might remember back in 17-18, the board made a decision to not go out with a bond that they had actually been considering in the previous year. And we were going to start a program of actually addressing capital needs within the budget, sort of on a pay-as-you-go type plan. So if there was monies available that we could put into the budget that stayed within the tax cap, we would budget those monies and grow them over time. So in essence, we were getting work done that was needed. We weren't not going out with a bond. There was no additional borrowing, et cetera. Also in 2019, the board made a decision to allow me to go to the voters with a capital reserve proposition. The voters overwhelmingly approved that proposition. And in the 2 years since, we established that reserve, which is nothing more than a savings account. If there's unspent monies at the end of the year, we can take those monies just like you do in your home budget. You set them aside, and next year you need a new kitchen, you need a new roof, whatever the case is. You've got those monies in the bank. We go to the voters, we say we're doing these projects, and the voters give us authorization to take those monies from our account. So this just sums up what we've done over the last 5 years. You see it's $35 million worth of work, which is phenomenal. 22 million has been actual capital projects that have been funded through the budget while staying within the tax cap. Our bus fleet, 5 years now, we've added 6 buses each year to replace our fleet. If you remember back in time when we started this in 2017-18, we had buses as old as 23, 24 years old, well beyond their useful life. The next column was our capital reserve utilization. Like I said, 2 years, the voters have approved us utilizing monies from the reserve to a total of about $9 million. And again, to reiterate, in total, over the last 5 years, we've had $35 million funded through the budget and reserves for capital projects and capital equipment purchases, all without any additional borrowing, which is fantastic. Capital recommendations for next year. My first recommendation would be the final year, the 6th year of our bus fleet replacement. We still have 3 large buses that have not been replaced. So I'd recommend replacing those 3 buses. I'd also recommend replacing 2 minibuses and adding 1 additional minibus with a wheelchair lift. You might remember a few years back, one of the years we added 2 wheelchair lifts to our large buses. Not only were these fantastic for the students, because obviously then students could travel with their class if they were going on a trip or an excursion. In the past, what we'd have to do is we'd be sending a bus to a school. Children would get on the bus. The child that needed the wheelchair accommodation, we'd have to send a second bus for that child, and that child was riding somewhere alone. So now we have the ability with our own fleet to transport classes together on trips, which is fantastic. And also it comes as a saving to the district because we didn't have wheelchair lift buses, so we'd actually have to contract with a firm to provide them. So my plan for this year would be to add these 6 buses at a cost of $625,000. This would complete the process of our fleet refresh, and it would be at least probably 6 to 8 years before we start this process over again. You have to figure about 12 to 14 years is the normal life of a school bus. Now, one of the things you may have noticed the governor is proposing in her budget is over a period of time going to electric buses. That certainly would be a fantastic place to land in a couple of years. Right now, it's still very cost prohibitive. 1 large electric school bus is a little over $400,000, plus the charging stations are about $50,000 to $70,000 each. So obviously that would be an expense that we could not afford at this time, but certainly as the technology improves, I can imagine us when we start this refresh in the future, changing over to an electric fleet. Capital recommendations for next year. Obviously, we have a large list of projects that gets refreshed each year. Priorities for health and safety items, roofs, bathrooms, ADA compliance, things of that nature. I've shared with you what the current list is a little over $50 million. And each year, we go throughout the buildings and we refresh that list. You recall our Director of Facilities retired back in December. Our new Director of Facilities has joined us this evening, Mr. Ryan Jacobellis. We appointed him about a month ago, and immediately I started sharing information with him about our projects that are currently in progress, and projections for the future. He jumped on board. He joined Mr. Tazinski and Mr. Gilardi for our custodial and maintenance teams. We all met. We all sat and met with our architect. We went over the projects, and this is the project list I'd like to bring forward for your consideration for next year. Certainly the list is endless, but I have to prioritize things. Obviously, health and safety first. Sagamore, there's certainly no perfect solution at Sagamore. Unfortunately, that building is just on the other side of an overpass. We only have the one egress in and out of the parking lot, but the parking lot itself could certainly be reconfigured for better traffic flow. The sidewalk along the front of the building is very far from the building. So there have been conceptual plans done by a traffic engineer that would move that sidewalk forward, create new bus loops, create new islands, create new traffic flows. So not only could we get all the buses in front of the school, because right now they wrap all the way around to the back, but we'd also then have a loop of 2 lanes of traffic behind the buses to accommodate parents coming through. I mean, none of it's absolutely finalized, but we do have conceptual drawings, and the cost that you see there, the $2.6 million, would be for that work as well as replacement of the entire parking lot. Bathrooms, we've been talking about the last several years. We've been doing them in phases in different buildings. Later on this evening, you'll approve bid awards for bathrooms at Samoset, Seneca, and North. Sagamore, we did 1 pair of bathrooms last year. If you visited the building, it's the bathroom right in front of the main office that the public uses when they're using the auditorium. They came out beautiful, and they're the model now for our new bathrooms. So next year, our recommendation would be to do 6 more pairs of bathrooms at Sagamore to get them up to speed to where the other middle schools and North are. Samoset would be the next phase. We would just do 2 pairs of bathrooms here in the building. At High School North, you notice we replaced all the lockers throughout the building. But one of the things the building sorely needs in many of the hallways is lighting and ceiling replacements. You have these beautiful new lockers in dimly lit halls with ceilings that certainly have lived their life. This would be a recommendation to replace all the lighting and the ceilings within the hallways throughout the building in areas that have not been updated over time. Roofs are always a topic of conversation. The next roof for next year would be the Cayuga Shingled Cafeteria roof. Remember, we just did Linwood this past year. Grundy has an old parquet floor in their gym that's always buckling. For safety reasons, I'd recommend we pull that floor out and replace it with a new maple floor similar to the one we're doing right now at High School North in the auxiliary gym. Our transportation building, when it was designed, first off, there are no lifts. We don't have a lift to lift the bus, and that's not something we can accommodate at this time, but we do have pits in the bays. The only problem is the length of our buses, the full-size 66 passenger buses. If you are working on a bus and the hood is open and the hood on a bus opens forward, you cannot work on the bus and have the doors closed. So throughout the winter, they're working in the garage with the doors wide open with the buses in the bays. This would be an extension for the last 3 garage bays to extend the building about 8 to 10 feet out with accommodations with new doors and a length deep enough that we could work on the buses inside the building without having to have the doors open. Public address systems, and actually I just realized I skipped over fire alarms. PA systems, all of our buildings have old analog systems. These 5 buildings are the highest priority. These systems have a brand of equipment that's no longer readily available. Without that system working, obviously we can't communicate through the building. The lockdown system doesn't function properly because that's where it flows through. So the recommendation, we replace the PA and in-building communication systems at these 5 buildings: Chippewa, Grundy, Linwood, Tamarack, and Winona. And the last item that I'm sorry I skipped over is the fire alarm control panels. This past year, we did a fire alarm upgrade at High School East with smoke alarms and some panel upgrades. The simplex panels in the other 14 remaining buildings are past their serviceable life. This would be to replace those panels throughout those buildings. Altogether, projected projects would be about $8.6 million. They can be done within the constraints of the budget, and they can also be done within the tax cap formula, resulting in a current levy calculation of about 2.07%. And one might wonder, Mr. O'Keefe, you just told us a few slides ago, the budget is short $12 million. Why would you even consider adding over $8.5 million worth of capital work into the budget? The capital project budget is a component of the tax cap calculation and actually floats outside of the budget for those purposes. So if we were to remove these $8.6 million, that doesn't close that $12.1 million gap. All it does is lower our levy by $8.6 million. So keeping this in there keeps us within the tax cap, keeps a modest tax levy increase of 2.07%, and gets this next round of work done for the district. Just jumping ahead, and again, this presentation as well as all of them are on the website. Here I just highlight some of the things that are also on the list that are up for consideration for future years. I mean, as I said earlier, we go through the buildings each year. Every 5 years as required by law, we do a full building condition inspection. Each year we do an annual visual inspection. We put together those lists, we update them. Building principals will come to us and say, I really wish, you know, this particular room could be refurbished or this room be repurposed or whatever the case is. Again, those all go into this list, and over time we prioritize them. So top of my list is roofing replacements. We still need tremendous amount of roofing replacements. Sagamore alone probably needs about $7 million still. That'll be a project we'll break up over time. If you drive past Sagamore, they're actually still up on the roof doing the phase from last year. Unfortunately, they weren't able to finish it before winter set in. So the one section of the back of the building, you can still see them set up there. Once weather improves, they'll be back up replacing that roof. We still have a couple of phases of bathroom renovations, but with the phase we're doing starting this year and next year, we'll be well on our way to replacing almost all the secondary bathrooms. The primary bathrooms in the elementary schools are all in relatively good shape. The other bathrooms are basically original to the buildings. The East Auditorium does need lighting and sound improvements and upgrades. The North parking lot, you know, we did the whole back parking lot last year and we did drainage improvements. The whole front of the building and the east side of the building need to be done as well as the student lot. I'd recommend that in a future phase. We've spoken in the past about our tennis courts. We did do some major repairs to them this past year. That should buy us probably 2 to 3 years before we need to do full replacements, but we need to keep that on our radar. High School North, the elevators need to be upgraded, the equipment and the cabs. Art rooms, tech rooms, things like that at North need to be done. Our guidance suite, our main office, and things like that might be able to be done within the constraints of our own maintenance team, but they are items that are on the list. We've also talked about air conditioning in large community use spaces like middle school auditoriums, cafeterias, and large high school gyms. Again, they're on the list. They're not a health and safety item, but they are a future goal for us. Other projects on the list, obviously in the past school year, through utilization of the capital reserve, both turf fields at both high schools needed to be replaced. It was at the end of their useful life. So the reserve worked out well for that, where those turf fields were replaced. We also did other upgrades at High School East, a retaining wall, new track, et cetera, all within the constraints of the reserve at no additional cost to the taxpayer. One thing that's been brought to my attention in the last year or two is the potential of turfing our baseball fields, our varsity baseball fields, as well as our varsity softball fields. So I just for the community at home, in case you weren't aware where the fields are located, I just give you some Google aerial views of them and circle them for you. Obviously, the building on the left is High School North. The top of the screen, that circle indicates where the softball field is. The bottom is the Bill Batewell baseball field down at the lower corner there. And the picture in the middle is High School East. In the back is our varsity baseball field. And down on the lower fields is the varsity softball field. So we have walked the properties, all 4 fields, with the athletic director, the assistant athletic director. They said they've gotten certain feedback from coaches. We showed the spaces to the architect, and he's come up with preliminary costs to do all 4 of about $8 million, about 8.1 to be exact. And that would include other improvements, dugout improvements or dugout replacements, depending upon the field, improved fencing, higher fencing, foul ball fencing, batting cages, warm-up, pitchers' cages, et cetera. But this particular project still needs a little more fine-tuning. I think we need to put together a group of people to spend a little bit more time to actually confirm what everybody wants. My recommendation for this project would be also, like we did with the turf fields, would be to use the capital reserve. Our capital reserve right now has $6.26 million in it. I do anticipate at the close of this school year having sufficient surplus where I could fund additional monies to this reserve so we could set them aside. If this is a project the board wants to consider, I'd recommend we continue working forward through the next school year on this and bring it forward as a proposition 2 in our next year's budget and pay for it through the reserve at no additional cost to the taxpayer. And that's really all I had for this evening. In our next presentation, hopefully I'll be able to update you a little bit more on where we are with any variances in the revenue budget versus the expenditure budget. And obviously, if there's more discussion related to the capital projects, it'd be great to have them now because I would need to fine tune that and have you adopt a secret resolution by our next board meeting. Any questions from the board?
Benny, please.
Hey, John, thank you for that. Hey, just a quick question on the capital recommendations with Sagamore. That's at the top of the list. Can you just, and I know you explained a little bit about the challenges, I guess, there. Why is that one more important than maybe other things on the list? Do we have safety issues there with the buses, or it's
I'm not sure if you've ever seen Sagamore.
Yeah.
Sagamore is a tremendous challenge. I mean, many of our buildings, North, Seneca, Sagamore, parts of Samoset, all need parking lots. But these parking lots would be done necessarily in kind. That parking lot needs a reconfiguration to improve traffic flow. I mean, buildings that were built in the 70s were never really designed for the volumes of parents dropping off as they do today. I mean, children either walked, they rode the bus, or they took their bike. We have dozens, if not hundreds, of parents on given days driving to buildings. There's no perfect solution for that particular property, but since it does need a parking lot as well as this reconfiguration, it would be the parking lot I would do next. I mean, North, we did the back parking lot last year, primarily because of massive drainage problems where the loading dock on bad storms would actually fill up with water and could actually breach into the building at times. But also, if you remember the back of North, it, I guess, had been expanded over time. There were odd islands in certain spots. Traffic flow behind the building wasn't very good. So that's why that one was first on the list, because of that drainage issue. This one next on the list because of the traffic issues.
And I noticed Seneca's on the list as well. They've got some challenges there. So it sounds like this is going to be something over the next couple of years.
Seneca's flow is good, but Seneca's parking lot's in very poor shape.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Please.
John, in regards to future capital projects, I know that you have the baseball fields on here. And, this is something that we talked about even prior to you starting in the district a few years back. There was a proposition that went to the state to not only redo baseball fields, but also to put in a turf field for practice and or games.
Actually, when I started with the district, the proposed capital project or bond project you had 8 turf fields in it.
And the thing is, like these fields here would be built into building aid. So just for the people that are out there listening, we get 76% back in state aid.
Correct, but only if the project is tied to a project within the building. So at East last year, the way I was able to get building aid on the new turf field is I did the fire alarm project. So if we were going to go forward with that, what we would do is obviously if the board's desire was to do the fields, we would try to do all 4 at one time. I think we'd probably gain some money in economies of scale doing them all together. But then we'd have to look at East and see what indoor project, maybe it's door locks on classrooms or some other improvement, or maybe even the auditorium upgrade. As long as there's an improvement in the building to instructional space, I can tie that outside site project to an indoor project, and then you'll get the full 76 cents aid.
Which is how we've done every field. In the
Correct.
district, always.
Yep. You always want to maximize aid unless there was some reason you couldn't do it.
So the thing is, a couple things. There's still a need for another field playing surface for kids to be at, because especially in the fall when there's field hockey going on, there are other kids that are displaced in other sports that are playing on muddy, rut-filled fields that potentially poses a safety hazard for kids running and landing in ruts and twisting ankles and so on and so forth. But I'm in favor of this. I was in favor of it back then. It was kind of shelved because it was Dr. Graham's first year, and he didn't want to go out with a project that involved turf fields. But we were one of the first districts to actually have turf fields, and then all of a sudden, all these districts passed us. So when you go to Connecticut and you go to Sayville and you go to pick a school district, there's turf fields everywhere, and there's playing surfaces for kids. So I think it has to happen. There's no question about it. What I'd like to see, and I'm going to be honest, and I think you would agree with me, St. James was built, and it was built sometimes with poor design, utilization of space, utilization of fields. We had drainage issues for years. Person's house was getting flooded every time it rained at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, that's why you have that retaining wall this year.
We had dry wells that weren't even catching water. We had tracks that were hanging over the ledge. My concern is that I don't know so much that the fields were properly organized and planned as well. And I'll give you a perfect example. The baseball field at East wasn't even built to specifications. For 6 years, our home field, at St. James was baseball heaven. We were able to get that back up and running again, but there's other issues with that field that I'm not 100% on board that it's the best location for that field, due to the fact that you have a baseball field that's the highest point of Long Island, or one of the highest points of Long Island. It takes on tremendous wind and cold weather in the spring. It makes it really difficult for the kids. It's a horror show to watch a game there. Literally, the first baseline is built 5 feet off the
Into a
curb.
hill, yeah.
Yeah. If you go out to the outfield, you almost need mountain climbing gear, to get back up that hill. And the issue that I've seen with steep, hills like that is that eventually it erodes, and eventually, things like the track is hanging off the ledge. And the concern I have is that we're going to have that same problem with this here. So before we dive in, with that, we have a year. I'd like to see the board at least consider getting a surveyor and possibly the architect on board to maybe take a look at all the property, and let's see where the best locations are. That field, I know you mentioned something about foul ball, nets. We better get really tall ones, because I've seen more cars damaged from foul balls. And what makes it even worse is that you have baseball players running through the parking lot to retrieve the ball as parents are picking up their kids, and it poses a safety issue there with the kids getting struck by a car. I'm all in favor, of upgrading and giving our kids the best possible facilities, but let's do it right. Let's do a full survey and say, listen, looking at the land, are we utilizing it to the best of our ability? I also think there's a need for more surface space, for other sports teams.
That could be certainly a charge of a committee to take a look at this over the next 5, 6, 7 months.
But the only thing is, like I said, I asked the board to really kind of take a look at that before we spend. Baseball field's probably $1.2 million.
Probably over $2 million each.
Oh, each. Okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah, the softball field would only be a turf infield with a full restoration of a grass outfield. But the baseball fields would be complete turf, infield, outfield, the entire complex.
I had suggested years back that the JV field, which is right next to the varsity girls softball field, has an unobstructed view. You can't watch a baseball game on that field. You're dealing with the dugouts. There's no room for bleachers. You have a storage, area where facilities keeps all this stuff. It's just a bear of a piece of property. And I'm not saying that we throw it out. If we end up relocating, we find that the JV field's a better location, that we utilize that space for something else. Maybe a future spot for another turf field, maybe for another sport.
Yeah, the only challenge with moving it to the lower one, we'd have to think about placements, is obviously the outfield would not be able to be utilized by other sports because it would be contained within a concrete
There's a
curb.
lot of land down there.
Yeah, but there's multiple, I think, soccer practice fields on the lower field.
And when you look at, like I said, that would be the I guess the job of the surveyor and the architect,
Right.
to look at it and say, hey, listen,
Utilize the space to its
And look-
maximum capability.
perhaps the way the baseball field is now, maybe is the best thing, but then renovations have to be taken into consideration to make that space.
And
best
obviously, this design does not include putting like a retaining wall around that first base side, which could prevent any future runoff and erosion.
My concern is the erosion on the other side of the outfield.
Yeah, the backside, we didn't need to do anything with that because that was completely surveyed when we were doing the wall around the other side of the football complex. And from what we could see, everything back there was stable. So there was, otherwise, part of that original retaining wall project at East was to put a retaining wall behind the outfield of the baseball field. It was only done around the bottom end of the football complex.
But understand, we were told we didn't have a retaining wall where they put the retaining wall last year.
Yeah.
Until the track was hanging over the ledge.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so-
The visitors' walkway rolled over the
Disaster.
edge.
Yeah. I look forward to future
I mean,
discussions about this.
certainly, if this is something the board wants to pursue, I think we should put together, coaches, the AD, interested board members, community members who would want to.
I think the
look
input
at
of the
it.
coaches and the AD is important, but I think the expertise of an architect and a land surveyor at this particular point,
For land utilization.
in all
And
honesty,
then, and do you want to also then consider other multi-purpose fields at the same time?
Absolutely.
Or is that another project for another year?
Well, if we could tie it into building aid, and we get 76.6%
It's just that obviously the
back.
project would grow to
Yeah.
probably 10, 11, $12 million.
Yeah. Once again, if we're getting almost, set 3/4 of that back in state aid,
Mhm.
it might be the time to maybe do it,
Mhm.
rather than having to,
Sure.
and that was the plan, I think, back in 15, 16.
Yeah,
City
my
Wall.
first few weeks here in the district, I presented a bond campaign presentation showing 8 turf fields.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anybody else?
Please, Mike.
Yeah, John, just want to talk about what was projected to be a $12 million shortfall.
Mhm.
And I saw the $3 million that you were able to use monies from this year to take those off. So now the budget became 355, but you're projecting 343 in revenue. But you did make mention that this does not account for unused fund balance.
Correct. That's just pure revenue with no utilization of reserves or fund balance. That's just all available revenues are projected state aid and the projected tax levy based on the 2.07%.
Now we're about 2/3 through the school year now, right? A little more than. So you know what the fund balance is projected to be at this point, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you right now because I don't know if you have it off the top of your head.
Our budgets have always historically had 2 to 3% surplus each year.
So,
So
I guess
you
my
say
question-
3% surplus, it's 3 cents in the dollar, but in Sachem, that's over $10 million.
Right. So my concern would be that you're also going to ask us to put money in the capital reserve, right? So, but
Well, what I would do is, my recommendation at year end would be, if this is our pot of surplus and this other project is something on your horizon, that we fund the capital reserve with the maximum allowable amount, if it's there, so that it's available to the board next year to go to the voters and say, this is the project we'd like to do. We've already got the money on hand. There'd be no impact to the taxpayer.
So you would be recommending to put money in the capital reserve that we didn't need to fill the budget gap.
Correct.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have about $61 million in total fund balance and reserves. I mean, in my mind, and I think I've put this in writing to the board in memos, my current projection would be probably a recommendation around $6 million, but very thoughtfully done, where 3.2 million of it would be from the ERS reserve, specifically to pay the retirement bill. We take about $1.3 million from the teachers' retirement system reserve, specifically to pay that increase that we're experiencing this year in TRS, and then the balance from unassigned to bridge the gap. Because certainly adding an entire new program to our secondary buildings
Right.
comes at a cost. There's no way that the 2% world can afford to pay for that. So it would be a prudent use of our reserves to bridge that 1 year. And then as we move forward, hopefully there's other areas we can pull back on, so that it does become part of the natural budget without the need of constantly, because once you get on the trail of appropriating a certain amount of fund balance each year, that amount grows.
Right,
Because
well, that's
you
the
need
concern,
6
right?
million this year, you need 7.2 next year, and so on and so on and so on, if you don't have the means of pulling back on it. We had very modest number of retirements this year. In future years, if we have a larger number of retirements, we'd pick up some gains and savings that way.
Okay, because I'm concerned. I don't want to start making people think we're going to start cutting program to fill a $12 million gap. That's
No.
not in the cards, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I think we would have had that conversation
Already.
already.
I know.
Already.
It's
yeah.
always a math puzzle, and I always come to a solution.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, please.
John, do we know what, from the town, what the equalization rates are going to be?
No,
So we have no idea.
no. That's always the surprise, because you go to the voters and you tell the voters that the levy is going to go up 2.07%. And if everything was perfect, their taxes would go up 2.07%. But in the fall, when the state apportions the way the assessments are, since they're done differently in every municipality, the state gives us a formula, which we apply, and then we apportion the levy. So in the last few years, actually, ISLIP taxpayers have received a larger percentage increase than our other taxpayers. And that can shift slightly year to year, but when you're talking about a $200 million levy, it can become a substantial amount of money to those taxpayers.
So here's my concern. I mean, you appropriated, I mean, you got the budget down from 358, $358 million to 355. But you made purchases this year that you anticipated you would have to make next year. Is that correct?
With both in-district, both general fund dollars as well as federal grant dollars.
So my concern is that, and I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm not just speaking for myself, but I don't think community members and taxpayers could afford another 8% tax increase. I mean, this year, Town of Islip taxes went up anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a year.
Mhm.
It was a big hike. And next year, if we see the same thing, and I know we have no control over that aspect of it,
Mhm.
but rather than appropriating every less surplus, every cent in that surplus, to capital projects, if we see that we're going to have that again, we could make appropriations for next year and go out with a lower budget if we had to.
Well, no, actually, I'm recommending that we would appropriate $6 million to close the revenue gap so that we can afford all the things that are currently within the budget. So we would be appropriating $6 million. I don't have additional monies then to lower the levy.
I know that's been some of the concerns from the community members when that first came out, and it was $1,000 hit this year in taxes. The only last time that I remember when we had $1,000 increase in taxes when St. Jim East and Sequoia were built, and there was reason that it went up $1,000. But
Yeah, you had that first year of debt with no building aid coming in.
but that's the only thing I'm concerned with is that.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I stress even when I do that part of the presentation. In the perfect world, your taxes should only go up by whatever our levy's going up.
Yeah.
But since we're 3 taxing jurisdictions, we don't control the apportionment.
And,
So-
and back years ago, we did appropriate money from surplus to offset taxes, and what ended up hurting us was the gap.
Well, that's, you end up
elimination.
going out lower than what the levy could be.
So,
But once you've done that, it's
Then you
not like
become
next year
reliant.
you can recoup those monies.
Yeah.
You
You're
have to
dependent on
start with this new lower levy amount to calculate next year's levy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? John, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to piggyback on Rob just quickly here at the end.
Sure.
About these fields. Are these preliminary discussions making the outfields big enough for them to be multi-purpose fields, or you're just turfing and fencing in?
No, just these preliminary conversations were just that. So if we want to expand that conversation, this would be the perfect time to talk about that.
Because
I mean, obviously like at Samoset, obviously is where the varsity baseball field is.
Yeah.
We would need to take over the adjoining baseball field to make a field long enough for a multi-purpose field.
And I know John Grillo has done those fields before where we were able to get soccer on the baseball field.
And when I
Field
was in
hockey on the
Sag
baseball
Harbor,
field,
we
lacrosse on the
passed a
baseball
bond
field.
proposition to do a turf field. It was so confusing. It had field hockey, softball, baseball.
But it might not raise the price up to 12 million if you just extend the outfield just
Correct.
slightly.
I mean, the problem you
enough.
have then is it sometimes looks a little goofy because obviously the base area is colored turf. So it's not going to be a nice big green patch. It'll be a baseball field that has other lines running through it.
Where we are, it only hits the outfield. That's how big the outfield is.
Yeah.
So that's just so.
Yeah, it all depends on,
And you can
like Rob
paint
said,
it with-
space utilization.
And you could paint it with washable paint so everybody
You
can use
can,
it.
so it's only there for the season.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
would save some money. And I just encourage, and I know you said you will, but talking to the coaches and talking to Gary and Phil, I think will be important pieces moving forward.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, but if you want to expand it into a multi-purpose on top of that, then
Yeah.
we certainly would have to tie that all together.
Something to look at while you guys are out
Doesn't
there.
impact the softball fields, because those we're just going to be doing the physical infield space. The only thing over at High School East, the position of that field is too far back towards the hill. They get tremendous amount of washout that comes down the hill and fills up, literally into the backstop. We probably would have to pull that field a little further forward. And then for access, there'd probably be a stairs coming down to the back of the field. And there is a handicap parking lot off to the east side. You'd actually have to make a handicap path, a paved path, connecting the parking lot to the visitors' seating area to make that new field ADA compliant. So anytime we do any improvement to any space, we need to bring it up to current code.
Why would you have to, you know, if you're going to redo the field, why couldn't you just put dry wells in to be able to absorb any water that comes down there? You know?
The field, I don't know if you've looked at the softball. The softball's tucked up way back deep into the hill. I mean, the architect's recommendation, looking at the space, would be to pull it a little bit further, you know, so that way he doesn't have to start getting involved with
Yeah.
putting other retaining walls and changes in it. Just literally 10 feet further forward would alleviate that problem. And there's also very limited space for visitor seating.
So would you need direction tonight to look at bringing in a surveyor and an architect, maybe Grillo, to look at it and maybe, you know, survey the property, see if.
Yeah, I mean,
it's right?
obviously, it's not time sensitive. We'll
Yeah.
continue with the budget process first.
Yeah.
And then once that process is over, we can kick this off at the end of the budget process or the beginning of the summer, start looking at those fields. Possibly Ms. Trombetta will work with Mr. Butel, and we'll put together a committee of people that will have more insight than I would have on it. And let's get some ideas together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple things I want to do, Mr. Spiegel. And so, Mr. O'Keefe, thank you for that. And the time, thought, and energy that goes into these things. These, you know, we've been talking a bunch about sports here and millions of dollars around things. I want you to know that those same conversations happen with academics. I just had a conversation with Mrs. Hines today, and we've been visiting our secondary schools in terms of their data and school report cards that are coming out. And we're going to have a presentation on March 23rd, our next board meeting, on something we're calling re-engaged. Is that right, Mrs. Hines? Refocused. Oh my gosh. Hold on a second. Yeah, it's been a long couple of days, and a long day today. I tell you, I was scared in the middle of the day when that snow was coming down and did not stop. Thanks goodness I was so busy I didn't get to think about it as much, because it seemed like everyone got home okay, I hope. So that took care of itself. But the conversation around being refocused, I'd be remiss if I haven't said the word COVID or masks tonight, so I'm going to say them right now and just say that we're doing exceptionally well in terms of the health of our overall community, which is really outstanding. Last week we had 2 days in a row of 0 student positive cases for COVID, and out of our 12,000 students, we're blessed, really. Also, staff numbers extremely well. We had days in a row, 0 staff as well. I know that we had 2 cases today, students, but again, 2 against a backdrop of 12,000 students. So we really feel like we're hoping to be past this. We have our mask optional approach, as you know, in our community, and everything I've heard and seen, having been in the buildings, we're accepting of one another. We're getting along with one kids wearing or not, staff wearing or not, really supportive of each other. I haven't had a single thing touch my desk, so I'm gonna knock on wood about that in terms of any issues around that. So very happy about that. Just last week or the week prior, I visited the robotics team. It's a district-wide robotics team. I visited them over at North, where they were working with staff and parents and moms and dads, and who are excited about the work as the kids are. Community members, partnerships that we have are really just incredible. Kids' safety. When I met a young lady, I said, "What is your role?" She said, "I'm the safety monitor." I said, "That kid doesn't have glasses on over there." She goes, "I know, I have it on tape. I actually film the kids while they do their work, and then I review it and speak to them." And I say, I noticed that you were drilling and you had glasses on, but you didn't have the proper side glasses, things like that. So really amazing what our folks have done at that point. We have also, Alex did not just pass me a
I
note.
unfocused you.
pass
That's
me-
my fault. We'll get back on.
This is a great moment to mention, and we're going to have these folks in as well. Our cheer teams, East made it up to the state finals. Incredible. I believe they placed fifth in the entire state, which is just incredible. And North Cheer won the state championship. Just incredible. We're going to have them in. And then the Nationals, the Arrowets down at in Orlando, our kick line Arrowets at North won the national championships as well. And I think East was like right there alongside them. I think placed second or third. I'll get some specifics. Ms. Trombetti will get it for me. But again, national champions for North's North's Arrowheads. I want to congratulate them also. So just incredible things for our students in so many places, so many areas. I'm so proud of this district. And I know, again, after having some of these data meetings, I'm going to give you a little tidbit of something that I've been talking with people with. The state really values the type of diploma when kids graduate with a Regents diploma with advanced designation. It means that kids have additional Regents under their belt. And we are one of the top, I'm going to say 15% in the state of students, 15% in the state where our students graduate with these additional Regents. I think it's incredible. We've done it under an 8-period day. We're about to move to a 9-period day next year. That's why Mr. O'Keefe's budget is so out of whack this year, because of all of these additions to cover the 9-period day. But kids are going to have additional math. They're going to have additional ELA. They're going to have the opportunity to take more rigorous courses, AP courses, any electives as well. It's really incredible where we are right now in Sachem, and we deserve the best athletics fields, and our kids do an incredible job, and our coaches, we deserve the best in academics as well. And we are right there in terms of bringing all that together. Just really proud of this district and where we're going and where we're heading, and the opportunities for our students as we go forward. So I want to thank you for that little speech right there for a moment. Are you going to pass me a note too? Because it's pretty obvious. I can't read from here. I can't read from here. Yes, please. Would you mind? Because actually, obviously, you know a little more than I in terms of this incredible person. So why don't you mention that? Yeah, thank you.
So we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the loss of a very important, dedicated principal who lost her battle over the last week, Gloria Flynn. Gloria Flynn retired from Nokomis Elementary School. She was a steadfast principal who, if any of you had known her or had your children, grandchildren there, you would have known how important it was for her to make sure that she touched the lives of every one of the students that she had, and was like her own children. This week, we celebrate the fact that she was with us as a dedicated professional and a Sachem family member, and we also mourn the loss of her, and just wanted to acknowledge Gloria Flynn and her passing.
Thank you so much. We are going to now transition to, are you asking me something else?
If we could just have a moment of silence.
Oh my goodness, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to transition us now that our presenter has joined us. Dr. Vera, how do you say your last name? Okay, I wanted to make sure I got it right. Foyer. Dr. Vera Foyer is here tonight from Northwell Health. She's going to do a presentation for us. You can come right up to this. Will this work, Allison, if she sits there? And then will you put us through the presentation, Allison? Okay. So, Vera, you're going to sit here, actually, in the center. We'll give you a clicker. Dr. Foyer is from Northwell Health. What's being presented tonight to our board and community is an opportunity for a partnership around mental health for our students, support for our staff. This could not be a more timely partnership. I was part of the genesis of this, actually, back in my old Nassau County days, a long time ago in my life. And to see it now come out to Suffolk County, I'm really pleased. Our students, our staff really deserve this and need this opportunity in terms of supporting their mental health. So I want to thank you for coming out tonight. We're going to present a few slides and merely have a discussion around some opportunities for our students and what is could be potentially a partnership for our district, our families, our community. So, Dr. Fuhrer, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And spending time with listening to this tonight. I'm going to try to explain the work that we do and how we think that it has helped the communities that we're currently working with, and hoping that it will continue to help many, many kids. So yes, I'm from Northwell, more specifically from Cohen's Children's Medical Center, and I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I work with kids. I direct our emergency services and our school mental health services. And like was mentioned before, this issue could not come on a better time to talk about supports for mental health, but to really talk about mental health issues and why a program like this is important. I want to just for a moment talk a little bit about background issues in mental health even before the pandemic. So this is preceding the pandemic. We had in this country 1 in 5 children and adolescents diagnosed with mental health issues. Suicide has become the second leading cause of death for kids and young adults aged 10 to 24 for years now. More deaths than all medical illnesses combined. There really is across the country a lack of timely access to reliable screening, assessment, and treatment overall. We have a shortage of mental health providers and a gap between hospital-based and ambulatory services. And then we had a pandemic, and the pandemic unfortunately further impacted on both youth mental health as well as access, and created this sort of unfortunate perfect storm of having very rapidly increasing demand for care and an ongoing workforce crisis, having difficulty accommodating the increasing need. And for that reason, the U.S. Surgeon General and the American Academy of Pediatrics, Child Psychiatry, and the Children's Hospital Association in late 2021 announced this as a public mental health emergency. And we have heard a lot of advocacy and a lot of work being talked about how this really needs to be supported at a higher level, because many factors, including media companies, social media, technology, schools, primary care, and many different areas that are impacting on youth and their mental health, need to really band together to come up with plans to impact on this crisis. So what does that mean for us, and what does that mean for what we can do in our communities? Schools have been known to be an important part of addressing mental health in youth, and there are well-known school mental health recommendations and services and guidance. And typically what is recommended to address an overall overarching need, mental health need in the community, is a continuum of mental health services that really addresses the various needs at different levels within a community. Because every community has kids that are high risk and have a lot of issues and need access to crisis care, need access to immediate care, need assessments immediately or higher levels of care. And there's kids and there's things that all students and all staff needs. All students need some education. It is in New York State guidelines. All students need to be supported for their needs so that they can learn. And then there's those at-risk students in the middle. And this pyramid, which I'm going to go in detail to each level about, is how we approach our partnership with schools, really trying to meet the needs at every level. And so this is Long Island, or some of it. You guys are much, much bigger than is indicated on this map. And we have a separate Suffolk County map that I'll show in a moment. But really the blue districts in Nassau County, the dark blue districts on the North Shore, is our North Shore Consortium of partnerships. We now have 11 districts in that consortium, and they have access to our behavioral health center in Mineola as their clinical service. And then we have 9 districts in the South Shore in light blue, who have access to a dedicated center, the Behavioral Health Center in Rockwell Center, which was our original site that opened with 5 districts initially in 2020. And then we have Suffolk County, and everybody in the peach color are indicate districts that have reached out about a potential partnership or interest. We have a closer map where Sachem is with its rightful size. You can see that there are, multiple places interested, and we've identified a few locations as potential locations. We're trying to find a location that is central to the districts interested and central to roads and transportation. So the 2 potential locations are both on Jericho Turnpike or either side of the Sunken Meadow, one on the Smith Dam, one on the Comac site. And we don't really know where we're going to end up. And again, we don't know yet which districts are going to end up committing to the partnership, but here's the interested parties. So to talk a little bit about our results so far, overall volume in the 2 behavioral health centers as of the end of February we saw 2,104 visits in our 2 sites. Again, initial 18 months were with 5 school districts, and at month 18, we had another 12 districts join and opened our second site. So there was a big growth there. And you can see that the columns keep getting bigger, even though we didn't add more districts, but just since September to February, you can see how much growth there was overall in volume, both indicating the need for this, as well as the communities where we're in learning about the resource and utilizing it more and more and accessing it more and more. So the linkage results are here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what this means. Everybody that comes to the Behavioral Health Center will end up being linked to ongoing care. The Behavioral Health Center is not a long-term care location. It is a location that replaces visits to emergency department or other crisis services, and it's a location that's immediately accessible, and that, unlike most of the crisis services in the community, helps then start care, initiate care, and maintain that care until we're able to link to community providers. So a very important part of our job and the job of our team is working, and we have full-time people working just on this, is connecting families to the right kind of care that they need, that was identified by the child psychiatrist during the evaluation as the care that they would benefit from most. And then that's, takes their insurance close to their house, feasible for the family to get to, and really connecting them. And our results are really promising. We're able to connect 80+% of kids to that ongoing care.
Can I interrupt you for 1
Sure.
second, if you don't mind going back? So we have our assistant director here tonight, Mrs. Caruana from Special Education, and our director, Mr. McElhern, who are back there. Guys, could we give them a microphone really fast? I'm sorry, Erin, thank you so much. It's like Donahue. I'm going to date myself and say Donahue. Mr. Pickerel probably has no idea what I just said, right? Donahue? You know that reference? Oh, my gosh. All right, very good. Yeah, I thought I was dating myself. So just in this moment here, we took 2,000 kids and linkages. Can you talk a little bit through that, Dennis? What's happening now with our kids?
Yeah. Currently, we're looking at a large percentage of our students. It was mostly at the high school in the past, but now we're coming down into middle school and elementary, where we have students who are on a daily basis requiring some kind of mental health support. We have students in buildings who are struggling, and what ends up happening is we will make a recommendation to take them to either any of the local hospitals, Stony Brook or Mather or South Oaks. And what's happening at this point now is we have students who are in crisis situations, and there are no beds available for those students. So they are going in, being treated, and then released to community resources that are almost non-existent. As Dr. Fura said, they're really are extensive wait lists for students. So we have students in crisis situations, and what's ended happening is buildings are reaching out to us as a special education department, asking us to consider going to the Committee on Special Education and making recommendations for therapeutic BOCES placements, and that takes time to get to that time. And I did have a situation this afternoon. One of the building principals called me in. We were having a quick team meeting about a student who we were very concerned about, and there are no resources available for those students. So that's where we are as far as a district goes, being able to support our students, and that mental health piece, as we, Dr. Ferrer mentioned, pre-pandemic, we had some challenging situations. We were having a hard time getting psychiatric evaluations for students or placements for students. The partial program at Mather would basically by January, February be a waiting list that was taking us through the summer. So that was pre-pandemic. Now we have students who are in very different situations because of the pandemic and with all the different stressors. So we're struggling. We're really at a loss in some cases on how to support our students.
So thank you very much. And I asked them to come tonight in case there were some questions about our specific program or what's being proposed. But Dr. Ferrer, just a positive linkage, what does that mean then?
Positive linkage means that we're able to identify specific resource for the family with somebody who takes their insurance, had availability, and depending on the type of referral, some agencies will actually give us the appointment to provide to the parent, and then we know that the appointment was made and how soon it was made, what was the turnaround time, and then in some cases it's the families following up, but with those cases we're following up a week after. Hi, Mom, were you able to call? Did you make the appointment? And then we're finding out whether they went. And so we are able to know until the first appointment, not beyond.
Are some of these appointments outside of Northwell?
Most of them are outside of Northwell.
Okay.
Most of them are, and especially here, as we're planning to come out to Suffolk County, of course, we already started, thinking about and learning about the local resources. We've already met with organizations and have had partnerships through the years with local organizations like Family Service League and others, local private practitioners, large group practices, really trying to identify the reason why it's helpful for a private practice to collaborate with us is that they recognize the value of the child psychiatric assessment that gets done at the center. Child psychiatrists are the scarcest resource and really are needed to guide treatment plans and really figuring out what kids need. And they're also the ones that can initiate treatment. So if we identify that medicine is needed, for example, we can start that and maintain that, bridge that gap that exists between the months it takes to get somebody into care so that kids are not waiting and families are not waiting, getting worse, ending up in the ER and the hospital. That really is sort of the goal of the program. And we'll see what, these results are changing month to month. I mean, these are the averages, but some months better, some months harder. And so to talk a little bit more about each level, the first level really is, the clinical core of this model is the actual service that you have access to. But I want to highlight that often people focus on that as the only component of this partnership. And I want to stress that this partnership really is a lot more. This is the tip of the iceberg. Kids that need crisis, they're the most pressing needs and they're the most immediate needs, but they're only part of your students. Kids that need those crisis assessments, either because there's a safety concern or because there's such level of symptoms, for example, school refusal, high level of anxiety, things that are really stopping kids from being able to function and succeed that we know need treatment. Those are the kids that get seen at the behavioral health center. And like I mentioned, the goals here is to provide access to that psychiatric assessment, linkage to ongoing care, the in-between, the bridge to that ongoing care, and really help families avoid ER visits, avoid hospitalizations, and provide support and education to the school teams and to the families. And we are creating environments, and I thought I had pictures, but maybe not. I usually have a picture in here about our Mineola Center because it's worth looking at the environment and the way it looks. They're created in pediatric spaces. It feels like going to any other pediatric specialist. It's not stigmatizing. It's not like the emergency department where you get changed and your things are taken away and there's a security guard, and really a very different experience for the families to come to the space. In the middle tier, we have collaboration, and this is where we're able to have resources deployed to the district to help support those students that need, for example, a psychiatric report for a CSE placement or for other purposes that, let's say, we're suspended for a particular reason and we're working on a return to school plan for them and they need that consultation. Other reasons why a psychiatrist would be beneficial to consult with the team. Here, the difference between the care at the behavioral health center and the in-district evaluation is that the in-district evaluation is really consultation to the school team. It's really recommendations and guidance and formal report that gets given to the school to help guide, whereas the behavioral health center is clinical care that gets provided in our clinical setting to the families that come to us voluntarily and consent to the treatment that happens there. And then last but not least, the collaboration also really extends to working together with the tremendous school teams that usually are really excellent and have been such an important part of our work. We have bi-weekly meetings with the PPS teams, so the counselors, the social workers, the school psychologists. We have every other month advisory board comprised of district leaders. So in each of our consortium, we meet with the superintendent and the PPS directors or whoever they designate as important people, to including conversations around the governance of the center and directions that we're going with the partnership. We do provide consultation with the team or with the clinical leaders, which often is myself, to schools on complex cases or different matters, again, expanding their clinical expertise with our expertise, and supporting linkages and connections. We run regular community education sessions, parent education, and we're starting parenting sessions as well, a series for that. We have professional development sessions for staff and faculty. We focus on staff support, and we send monthly newsletters to the school community, a separate professional and community version that the school can then share with the community if they choose to, that has links to our community sessions and other helpful resources. I talked a little bit already about this, the in-district evaluation. Again, this is part of our partnership. It's requested as needed by the school, and this is the only element that's an added service to the other services. And they really, some schools utilize it, some schools don't. It really depends on what you need or what inner resources you have. We have districts that have their own part-time psychiatrist that does these kind of consultations for them, so they don't need this service from us. And then there are schools that utilize us because the pricing and the connection to everything else we're doing together just makes more sense to them. So it's as decided by the district and can be chosen on an ongoing basis. And then professional development, we have a core curriculum for staff that focuses on all the clinical core topics of suicide, self-injury, anxiety, stress, school refusal, threat assessments, trauma-informed care, substance use. Those are the core topics. And then the electives have started this year and are based on requests from the schools. So it's curated specifically based on district requests. And this year we have covered autism, ADHD, classroom behavior management, LGBTQ youth mental health issues and social determinants of health for some of the things requested. Eating disorders actually was another one that we just added. Staff wellness and mental health is another focus this year. Through the pandemic, really school staff, faculty, teachers, counselors really struggled, and managing their own stress and wellness is something that we try to provide support with. So we're running mindfulness sessions, resilience coaching, and we're promoting something called Stress First Aid, which is a peer resilience support model that we also utilize with healthcare workers to help them manage ongoing stress. We also started an Ask the Expert series where we have Northwell experts come and talk about the different services and how schools can collaborate with them. So we had our emergency room, our inpatient units, partial hospital, our eating disorders program, substance abuse programs come and talk to and meet with our school teams where they can ask questions, and they're really question and answer sessions for the schools to have access to these experts. And again, we customize topics per request and have held specific trainings for individual districts as well. Same with community education. The topics really branch and customized depending on need. In the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of interest for us to talk about COVID and COVID impact on both mental health and medical impact of COVID. We really pivoted from that and have tapped into other topics: healthy sleep, nutrition, depression, school refusal has been something, anxiety has been something that really have been requested frequently. Managing technology and screen time for kids is a very popular topic. So really, again, whatever communities, PTAs, SEPTAs are requesting of us to accommodate, we try to find the right person to speak on it. And we do also have a growing library of YouTube resources for parents to use. And like mentioned earlier, we send a newsletter. This gets sent to the school. So it gets sent as a professional version and a community version, and the school shares it with the community. Different schools choose to do different things. Some send it out in text, email, some put it on the website, some don't send it out. Really up to the districts to decide what works best for their community. We provide it as a resource. We also have an option to opt in to our Cohen Strong program, which is my favorite program, where we train peer advocates, because I think in all the work that we do, the most powerful voice is the voice of the kids, and peer-to-peer contact and peer-to-peer leadership is so important. So in Cohen Strong, we work with high school students, train them as peer advocates, and they have then worked through the year with us and their schools to create programs for their own school buildings that combat bullying or whatever the biggest issue they identify as kids in their district. And they have done amazing projects and really have been just a pleasure to work with. So with that, I'll close and take any questions that you
real
all
quick
have.
before questions. I don't know if Dennis or Beth, this is the second time you've seen this presentation now. Anything you want to add in terms of our role in this regard, or anything that we might want to highlight?
Well, I think that the one piece that I would like to highlight is the that mental health piece of feeling safe, and students need to feel safe in their learning environment in order to academically progress, socially progress. And our staff also need to feel that same sense of safety and security. And what's happening a lot of times for our students is when they're struggling, our staff are feeling at a loss and feeling inadequate at times, because they're feeling that they don't have the resources available to be able to support students. And, we have some outstanding professionals in this district. We had a chance to hear about some of our athletics, but our mental health staff is phenomenal in this district. And, we thank you all again for the number of additional social workers that we've added. But what ends up happening is when those outside resources are not available, we're sometimes left floundering, and nobody wants to be left in that situation. And so that's really kind of where we're at, which is why something like this would be a nice opportunity to support not only the students but the staff and our families who are also out there. Yeah, especially the. Yep.
I think one thing that struck me when the first time I saw this presentation was just the global approach that it takes, and recognizing that we need to start supporting our students before we get to that crisis point. You know, a lot of what we talk about is trauma-informed care and how we're doing that, but not recognizing that when we get to that crisis point, it's another trauma for the student, for their family that they're going through.
Yes.
And if we can work with our parents through the parent workshop and giving them opportunity to learn how to manage their own situations, giving more to our staff in order to be able to support the students in school, we may not get as many students getting to that crisis point. And I think that the delay of being able to find the care for our students is really what's lending to that aspect.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fuhr, again for the presentation. And questions from the board?
First of all, Doctor, thank you for the work you do. It's certainly needed at this particular time, more than ever before. My question is, this is obviously a contractual partnership. And how logistically, how do the services come? Do we call you for specific services, or in other words, is there a menu list and we call you, say, gee, we're going to need some training, or we're going to need this? So how does that logistically work?
Sure. So I can answer both. So the way it works with the contract is through BOCES. So we contract with BOCES, and the districts choose the service through BOCES. And then in terms of how it works logistically, when a district comes on, we onboard the district staff. So we meet with everybody on the PPS team to educate them about how to access the service. We actually have an electronic referral form where they can, like you said, have a menu of what they need. There's a student that needs to be seen within 24 hours because it's a crisis. There's a student that needs referral to care and has high-level services or needs immediate care. There's a consultation we need, an in-district evaluation we need, so on and so forth, and then that can get submitted. The clinical service itself, the behavioral health center, is accessible to families without the school. So we also educate the community about the service existing. We work with our districts to put the information out there and on the website for families to be aware of the number, the hours. They can call, they can come, they can walk in. Before COVID, we had walk-ins. With COVID, we had screening. Now we're kind of switching back more towards the walk-ins. You know, we'll see what comes. But really, the idea is to give access and to have access in multiple ways. We also work with our pediatric colleagues because often parents seek out pediatricians, rightfully so, as the first person that they're seeking help and guidance from. And pediatricians are often in the same predicament that was described by the school staff. They don't really have resources to connect these families to, so they end up often sending kids to emergency rooms or crisis services themselves. And so we work with the pediatricians to know that when you have students from these districts, they now have access to this service. And actually 9-10% of our referrals come from pediatricians and from our emergency room colleagues that we work with. About 40% come from the community directly, parents accessing the service on their own without the school's involvement, and about 40% come from the school staff.
Thank you.
Rob?
Dr. Fuhr, thank you for coming out and providing this presentation. It was very informative, and look, it's no surprise, you know, going back 2 years, this Board of Ed will tell you that conversations that we were having is, you know, once this pandemic becomes an endemic, you know, what is the fallout going to be? We don't even know the effects it's going to have on our children, you know, and certainly we're seeing it now. There's no question about it.
Right.
You know, there's many people up here that are student-facing educators. And even in my own program, I see more and more 11th and 12th graders really struggling with anxiety, that even the medication is not working. They need far more than what the medication could even provide. Here in Sachem, we have pretty much a city. I mean, we have more children that some towns in New York State have. You know, we're a very large district with you know, really a diversified population of students that have mental health needs, and so my question is twofold. Do you ever work specifically with districts to set up programs that are inclusive to that district, within the boundaries of that district? In other words, if you had space within a district, would you ever put together a program specific to Sachem so that our kids can get, immediate service without having to compete with, 30 or 40 other districts?
Yeah, so I think that's something that we have been asked before and asked about. Right now, it's a resource issue because really, I wish we could, and certainly certain districts might need that, even if they have centralized access. They might still need additional services within their buildings. There are school mental health services that provide ongoing care within the buildings, and when you have such a large district, it might make sense with so much need. It might make sense for the district specifically to go down that road, but it is very resource heavy and very complex to set those services up. Right now, at this moment, I think what we're focusing on is really trying to weave a net around these communities to try to be able to have at least central places where there is that expertise, where is that level of high level of evaluation and care that can happen, and we can utilize our resources in a way that more kids can benefit. But that's not to say that down the road, with working together and identifying the needs more, that's not something that we would or could work on. Just today, just how much comes, and this is, sorry, it's not a direct answer to your question, but it just reminds me, just the partnership, the collaboration with the districts within the consortium is also a very powerful element of what we're doing, because both for the staff, this feeling of we're all dealing with the same issues and we're all trying to solve the same problems is very powerful, but also best practice sharing, significant brainstorming. Today in our Nurture Consortium, we talked about creating a work group and maybe creating a shared unique program for school refusing kids that districts can maybe create together. So really a lot of work gets done together and through those collaborations. So that's an important component. But to your point, every district's needs are different, and heading down the road and partnering together, I wouldn't say that it's impossible that we identified that as a need.
And then my only other question was, you'd mentioned about, some of a pricing and connection, for using the health services. What are the fees to the district? Okay. And then how does it impact the families? Do you go through their health insurance first? Are there administrative fees to the district that we would have to budget for?
So let me jump in a little bit on the overall fees, because I'm still working on that piece, because there is a price system set up per student. And so we will be amongst the top paying districts into that because we have so many students and staff. So that is still being worked on and negotiated. I know we're working through BOCES. Right now, we're looking at something that would be about $200,000 per year for us. That's a significant number. However, every penny of that, I'm confident. I work with Mr. O'Keefe on this and Mrs. Hines and our entire team around our federal dollars now that are COVID related and learning loss related, all that pool there. Every penny of that, almost $200,000, again, it's not finalized yet, could come from that pool. So in essence, we would use the federal grant monies for these next couple of years, and something that we've been working on is trying to get those federal grant monies to allow us to work on it for like the next 10 years or so. And that would allow us to pay for this grant out of that fund for the next several years going forward. If at any point we didn't have those dollars access to us, we'd have to look again at all of our resources and make a determination as to whether or not this is going to go into our general fund and what might need to go away in order to do that. But we don't initially, again, have to do that. Every dollar could come from federal grants to pay for this initially for those first couple of years. Yeah. And then there are other fees, and that's Mr. Scaro's question in terms of some specific things that could be outside of the partnership.
Right. So the overall cost for the partnership is what is being finalized, like as quoted. The families only have cost if they do come to the center, and the center is a physician practice. Insurance, to the extent that it exists, get utilized. We will see kids without insurance. We'll also accommodate high deductible plans and reduce the payment to a co-payment level. And really, families are typically only responsible for a co-payment for the visit. And it's a regular outpatient co-payment specialist payment, which ranges from $20 to $50 typically for folks. But again, if there's no insurance that exists, we work with the families to help them obtain insurance for their children so that we can connect them to ongoing care. Because while we can, bridge them and keep them at the center without insurance for connections and for ongoing care, they're going to need that. And the other components, the cost covers all the other components of the partnership beyond the center, including all the other things that I had mentioned.
Now, if we enter into a COSA agreement with BOCES,
Yeah.
And there is a $200,000 fee, okay, that we're going to pay for through federal funds, is that aidable through that COSA agreement?
Yes.
Not if you're paying for it with grant dollars. If it was being paid for through general fund, then yes, you would receive BOCES aid.
And what is that BOCES aid percentage?
Well, it's in the 50s, but we'd have to look at the particular COSA because not everything is always, fully aidable. I mean, sometimes you have that $30,000 or $35,000 cutoff on the salary side and things like that. But generally, services are in 54% range.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering those questions.
Mr. Sarnia?
So Rob touched on some of the things I was going to talk to you about. I mean, obviously, we're addressing probably our most vulnerable at-risk student population, right? That you're dealing with every day. So I think we as a board obviously owe our administration and students and staff and families whatever reasonable thing we can do. So this is certainly within the bounds of reason. But I also selfishly want to be Sachem, and I would want my own BHC, is what you're saying, right? That's what we would want. We'd want somebody set up. Now, we have plenty of room around here that can be rented at least. So we're kind of centralized in Suffolk County. So as you start to think about this,
Mr. Iserni, the first meeting I ever had with our good folks
Yes.
here from North, she remembers that I talked about Gate Lot and this
Yep.
building that we have here, and I wanted to build it just for Sachem. You're exactly right.
Well, we can't say just
And-
for Sachem,
and,
but
well, I did start there. And then we talked about, hey, we're centrally located. Perhaps people come here. I know you looked at some property in Comac and again Smithtown, but I think Mr. Iserni is going to offer here is, again, if you guys aren't done fully looking, that
I mean, I think we would be open to something like that, right? I mean, you would love to have them on site, right? So and that also is going to set off some of the cost because now you're taking in the lease payments for that, right? Even though we're paying them. So I think that's like a win-win-win for Sachem kids. That's
so maybe we'll go. Okay, we're going to continue this conversation anyway. So we'll talk again, and I'll speak with Dr. Fura is the
Yeah.
like brain.
My out is I'm
this
just
not
a doctor.
her area.
I'm
Brains
just
the
a
operator.
shrink.
We need her O'Keefe, right? We need her.
We need
O'Keefe.
their O'Keefe.
Right,
Yeah,
we need
their
their
business
O'Keefe.
person.
Well, I mean, there is some economy of scale here, right? I mean, what you're dealing with every day, you probably could fill that BHC on any given day, right? So we are a very large district,
Yes.
right? You're servicing a very large population of students and parents and kids. And I think that's certainly something that we should be examining wholeheartedly. So if we can continue on that path, I'd be very happy to see what those options.
Yep. Ms. Pickowitz?
I know.
Ms. Pickowitz?
Yes, everybody took my questions and comments. But yeah, that was my concern looking at the map. I am an educator, so I hear, everything. I see the classroom. Try to not get emotional about it. But you have kids who don't want to come to school. Just kids who are shutting down. It's trying. It's trying on the educators. We feel helpless. And you talk to the parents and they get to go to a counselor, but it's so far away, or they can't get an appointment because they're going to work and they feel horrible that they can't get out of work, but they need to put their child's, mental health as a priority.
Yeah.
So it's much different. It's frustrating. It's upsetting. It's emotional. But, looking at the map, thinking of parents from Sachem, more on our east side having to travel even further, I would love to see something closer to us so that parents aren't traveling, and that if they could get off work and get home at 6 and bring their child too, just thinking of that, like trying to get
Sure.
things closer to us. But I can't stress enough the need to help our students, our own children, and then also our students and the kids at HM. It's, I've definitely seen a decline in my own students and my own, the staff, my colleagues, everybody. I think professional training and in identifying these students, even not even your huge at-risk children, just those kids,
Yep.
that, they're like, well, they're fine. I'm sorry, I hate the term resilient, because, we expect a lot of our kids, and then they become adults that are
Yeah.
going to counseling too. So we just want to be able to reach our kids, sooner than later. And I think whatever we could do, I think is just a plus for our community.
Ms. Pickowitz, no one needs to be reminded at this table or in this community. We lost a child this year. It can never happen again. It can never happen. It can't. So everything that we can do around this, we're going to do. So, and again, I'm not promising jumping out ahead or anything, but that's how important this is to us.
Sure.
I just
Sorry
have
for
just
that
a quick
loss.
question. You talked about linkage earlier, and you were in that 80% range. What happens to that other 20% or whatever that number is?
Yeah.
So-
Most of the time we lose contact. So families either decline decline the referral and just say we're not interested at this point, or I can't do it at this point, or they don't call us back simply, or never reach back with the information. So those are the
All right,
two
so it's
biggest
not a linkage
categories.
between finding care and their insurance. It's just you've offered care and they've declined it.
So it is a linkage between, the linkage means connecting them to ongoing care where they take their insurance, but oftentimes they decline that. They say we, don't have the capacity, don't want to go, don't think we need it, or we just lose them to the contact, because oftentimes if we're not, really acting in that crisis is very efficient. And if we can get and connect and really get going, then it can work out. And if for some reason that doesn't happen and doesn't work out 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, families then change their mind. They don't want to go.
My concern was that when you talked about linkage was that you couldn't find care for the child, and then that child
No.
then fell through a crack of some
No.
sort.
No, if we can, we hold on. If they need care, we hold on to them until we find them care.
Okay.
So, which we do hold on. We have had kids that we have held on for 4 or 5 months. We were treating them because that's how difficult it was to find the right kind of care that they needed. More often than not, we're able, the average turnaround time for our linkage is about a month. So on average, it takes about a month to connect kids to care. And sometimes it's much quicker and sometimes it's much longer. And in between, the ones that really need the immediate care, we hold on to. So about a third or a little bit more, almost 40% of the volume that we see is follow-up bridging care.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would probably
Please.
suggest that 20% would be greatly reduced if they were in an environment that they were very familiar and comfortable with, like one of our own buildings or. So, wouldn't you say? I mean, think about it. Just going to a strange office building
tough.
seems disconnected from the school to them. But, if
Yeah,
they're
please.
comfortable where they're at, it could probably help. So,
Mr. Reynolds?
So, Doctor, thank you again for the presentation. Just in terms of, I don't know what's called maybe success rate with finding the right care, the right diagnosis, right? Because whether it's bipolar or depression, right? Sometimes you go down a path of not diagnosing it correctly. So I think that's the value that Northwell brings. And then what's the success rate of staying with that care and stabilizing? Right?
Yeah, that I don't have I wish I knew.
Okay.
I wish I knew.
Because that's the
We
challenge,
do
right?
yes, it
keeping
is
them in
a
the care and
challenge.
getting them into a stable position, right?
Right, because also the challenge about knowing where they are is that we work with so many agencies and so
Right.
many clinics to be able to find the care that these kids need. It's really impossible to follow up to see what happens to them. We do know from the kids that we refer to our own clinic, which out here in Sachem, they'll probably more limited just because of where you are, and the clinics are at South Oaks and Zucker Hillside. But we do know that kids that we connect to our own clinics, the follow-up rates are very good, and they do stay in care, which is an important indicator of engagement, and they stay in care longer than kids referred from the community. So kids referred from ERs and other, entities. So that engagement piece, working, and we don't always work with the school together because sometimes families prefer not to communicate with the school. And I guess that's something we didn't talk about, but something that often gets asked by the community. The care that happens at the center is protected by HIPAA. It's a care space like any other clinical care space, is protected by those governing principles of only anything ever happens with a minor with the parents' consent, including talking to schools or talking to outpatient providers and such. But yeah, the connection rates, at least to our own clinics, are really good. But it is difficult, and that 20% is actually, again, ebbs and flows, because if you ever try to go to a therapist or have your child go to a therapist, it's a commitment. It really is. It really takes time. It's regular. It's weekly, like you said. Sometimes only appointments during work hours or school hours. Your kid doesn't want to miss school. It is very difficult.
Anyone
It's more
else?
frequent than an orthodontist, right?
Thank you.
I think one of the bigger issues is sometimes you can't get an appointment for
Right.
2, 3 weeks, 4
Right.
weeks, and when
Months.
Yeah, and when there's a crisis,
Yeah.
your kid needs help immediately. And I think that's where some of
Yeah.
the board members are going for, is having an inclusive program,
Yeah.
that could really service our kids, that's where I was going for. I know you read my mind over there, but we're big enough, city here in
Yeah.
Sachem to be able to possibly do that. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hospital. I just want to put in, you have to wait time at a local hospital. I work at 14 months. 14 months. And that's for an employee who works there, family, for child psychiatry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fuhr. Thank you so much
Thank you.
coming out here
Absolutely.
and working with us tonight.
Thank you.
Dr. Fuhr is so dedicated. She had another presentation tonight, which she did from my office while we were doing our other
And
business.
the light was turning on and off.
Oh, my goodness, I'm sorry. If you don't move, around, the light goes out. I will certainly report back to us. Yes, sir. I know Northwell's anxious to find partners by the end of the month, I believe. So we'll be talking about this soon again with our group. I think worked with Smithtown last night, and I think they jumped in. So we're not going to let this fall by the
Yeah.
wayside.
Yeah,
Just so
we
you
have,
know.
like you guys saw on the map, there's many districts. And so, yes, we have.
There are many districts.
that
You don't have to
we've
say another word. There is
that-
only one Sachem, though. So
And you guys have been at the conversations for a long time. So
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please safe home. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our superintendent's report. Quite lengthy. I apologize, but thank you.
Hour and 50 minutes.
Wow, that's a record. That's
Yeah,
a record. My fault tonight. Sorry. Thank you.
Yes. On the top of page 2 is letter F, approval of minutes for the February 16th, 2022 regular meeting. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Scavo, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 2 is visitors. The first visitor section is for agenda items. Mrs. DeSimone?
Hello. I don't know if this is on. First of all, wow. Amazing meeting tonight. I've never felt more confident that we can move forward. I came here to talk about things that I wrote down, but there's a couple of things just from this meeting alone I'd like to mention. I hope I don't go over by doing it. The first thing was when you were discussing the budget and the turf fields. Is there like a guarantee for how long that they'll cover that? Only like say, so I was looking into it personally. It's like a 20-year thing. Is there?
12 to 14 years is usual.
Okay. And Mr. Piccarello, I completely agree with what you said about using any field. You should have that forward thinking to where if there's different seasons and there's different sports and you can utilize one area for 2 different sports and the same thing, excellent. That's wonderful.
See, we can agree.
Yes. And you also made a great point. I like what you said about, you really have to, and I find this in my practice and in other things, consult the people who are doing it and the ones that are there working on the fields. If that's not gonna, I'm not saying you should change it or whatever, but I like the fact that you're forward thinking to 15, 20 years. In Sachem, we stay here for 15, 20 years. Our families have been here for decades. I've lived here, 50 some odd years. I won't say how long, but we need to think 15, 20 years out if that's going to be a drainage issue. Let's do that. So that's
Any
that.
great ideas for the superintendent? Any comments I had? That was a great
Yes,
idea.
I like that you took a
Okay.
coffee break to focus because that's what I do all of the time.
Refocus. That's
Yes.
Mrs. Hines. You're going to hear that branding. Go ahead.
So great. And second, what an amazing presentation. What an amazing presentation. Whatever we have to do this, we have to do this mental health thing. It from a parent's perspective, from a community perspective, from a teacher perspective, and also most importantly, of course, from a children's perspective. This is I think everybody can agree, no matter where you live, that this is such a necessary service. And coming from a healthcare background myself and working in an emergency room for over 20 years, this is not an area you want to bring a child or even an adult, but let's just say a child, for an emergency mental health issue. It's horrific to be there. It's scary for even adults. And if we're at that point to where that's where only place we have to access mental health services, then we have failed our children. And we need something like this in our school. Please, whatever we have to do, let's do this. Let's do this for the kids, and let's do this for us as a community. So now, if you grant me a little bit more time, I want to get to the point I came here to speak about, but I'll go through it quickly. I know that I've been here a couple of times for the budget to see what we were going to do for the elementary education homework help. And I wanted to follow up with that to ask what portion of the budget has been set aside, if any, for the elementary education aftercare, school homework or help. I don't know what we're calling it. If there is a budget moving forward for that, and what stage of planning we're in for that service. So we'll know if it's going to begin this year or next year, or if it's something that we're still kind of thinking about, and who will be providing the service. Because I know that a couple of different times you talked about high school kids coming in, but I know that also an educator is going to hopefully be the one running it. Where are we with that issue?
I'm going to ask Mrs. Hines if you don't mind. All right, we're going to answer this real quick.
Yep.
Mrs. Hines, you want to jump in?
I was hoping you were coming tonight, Mrs. DeSimone.
Yay!
So I think we talked about it lightly, but we are at the point where we do have interest in running. I don't want to just say like it's a homework club. It's also some additional support that might be just for reading, for math.
Right.
Homework could be, a portion of that. So we are going to be running that in all 10 of our buildings.
Okay.
Right now, we're just organizing the logistics, and you'll see that on the next board agenda.
Okay.
So that is at all of our elementaries. Those are funds that we will have for the next few years through our federal stimulus
Okay.
funds that we have, as well as our Saturday enrichment program and our summer program that we will be running again. And, we do anticipate running those for the next several years as we look at the budget. Just like what we're talking about with Northwell Health, we'll have to make some, decisions in terms of what we want to move forward. But right now, it's really to address all of the learning loss and what we're doing in school. When we're looking at data, when we're doing our walkthroughs, when we're meeting with our teachers and our administrators, so that we know each student down to the zero, down to that nugget.
Yes.
So if you're here next week, I think you'll be very pleased to hear all the work that has been going on through the pandemic and what we're doing moving forward as well.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all very much. Very
Thank you.
encouraging today.
Thank you. On the bottom of page 3 is business items, consent agenda A through C. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Isernia, seconded by Mr. Baumann. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 4 on page 4 is personnel teachers, consent agenda A through R. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mrs. Pickowitz, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Mrs. Capolitan, please.
want to acknowledge a few folks on tonight's agenda for a job well done. We have Jonathan Kovlowski and Kara Marol, who were leave replacement TAs, who were moving to probationary TA spots for the job. Great work they've done. Also, we have Jennifer Carpenter, who's going to be staffing us for the 22-23 school year. Back many years ago, fiscally, we had to abolish some positions, and we are so delighted to have her come back and join us back into the fold as a LOTE teacher here in the district. So congratulations to hers and the other folks as well.
Excuse me. In the middle of page 11 is number 5, personnel support staff, consent agenda A through J. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Scavo, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, please.
Just a recognition for Mr. Craig Pagliuca, who has just taken on a leadership role as the chief custodian, which is a pretty significant role over at Seneca Middle School. He's been a custodian with us for many years, and that's a awesome opportunity for him. Also on tonight's agenda, you can reflect on some of the comments and the information that Mr. O'Keefe shared about our facilities and all the work that our maintenance and facilities folks do. Tonight on the agenda, we have a retirement for Pat Giambrone. Almost 22 years here in the district. He certainly had an integral part in all the opportunities to make sure that our buildings, our classrooms, our office spaces were and are what they are today. So congratulations and a great retirement for him. And on tonight's agenda, we have a retirement for Elaine Alexander, an office assistant in the personnel office. She's a dedicated professional and an amazing professional who, through the ebbs and flows and the challenges and all the highs that we faced over the times here, has been a steadfast support for my office and everyone who we have had involvement with. So congratulations to her, and I'm sure she'll enjoy her time with her baby, her grandson, first grandchild, and congratulations in her retirement. We wish her all the best.
On the bottom of page 14 is number 6, committee appointments. Is it just letter A? I apologize. Just letter A. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Isernia, seconded by Mr. Scavo. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 7 is contracts, consent agenda A through D. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Pickowitz, seconded by Mr. Baumann. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 8 is the approval of field trip for this school year for North and East trip to Washington, D.C. and Busch Gardens for their senior trip. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Baumann, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 9 is a donation of various specialty drywall tools for the Sachem North Carpentry Program in approximately $600. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Scavo, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Number 10 is a budget transfer in the amount of $767,000. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Scavo, seconded by Mrs. Pickowitz. Any questions? Please. Do you have your, yeah.
Sure. We've got a couple of things going on here. First thing, we're taking some monies that are not needed in our transportation budget for BOCES related transportation. We're moving them to bus fuel lines. Obviously, everyone's been to the gas pumps lately. The price of fuel has gone through the roof. So we're moving $130,000 to cover a shortfall on fuel supplies. We had $117,000 in secondary salary lines. That money's being moved to our physical education department for wall padding. I believe it's the East wrestling room walls, but it's to recondition one of our athletic spaces. And the final one is for $520,000, where we have monies left over in our TAN interest line. Those monies are being moved down to our facilities department. A couple of different things. We've got just miscellaneous asphalt and concrete work that we always do in the spring. But another part of the project is HVAC upgrade. So the administration wing in this building is being done this year over the summer. The roof is being replaced. A lot of the offices have aging mini split units. Obviously, all the mini splits have to come off the roof. I do not want to put back old aging units. So I'm sourcing the materials I need to have them on hand so that they're ready to go in the summer when we're working on it. And also one of the projects that was on that master spreadsheet of capital projects was HVAC upgrades in elementary main offices. Quite costly. It was about $1.2 million if we were to go through a capital project on it. But our in-house team can do them one at a time internally just by purchasing the materials. So we're going to source all the materials, and our own crews will replace them building by building between now and hopefully the start of next school year.
Good. Anyone else? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 11 is the Committee on Special Education, consent agenda A through B. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Baumann, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Sorry, you made a face at me. Number 12 is monthly reports. Does anybody have a report? Please.
Just an update on the Legislative Committee. So I think we've talked about this in the past. March 16th, we're confirmed for the Legislative Committee. We've got several elected officials who are confirmed to attend. I think we're going to do it right here. We're going to do a live and possibly a hybrid approach with live streaming as well. There has been a flyer that was published out to the Sachem page where the community can ask questions. There's a QR code. We please ask the community to get the questions in. What we'll do then is the committee will get together next week, sort the questions by topic, and then be able to, we've got the moderator from the PTA Council who will then ask the questions. So hopefully we're looking forward to a good event. But again, we need the questions from the community, so it's out there. And I think there's going to be a social media blitz, if you will, over the next couple of days from the committee members. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please. Yep.
So tonight, the district-wide safety committee met for a short period of time to talk about the mask. I'm excuse me, not the mask. I don't want to say mask. The identification card policy that we talked about. My apologies. There was some. There was, there's a the proposed thing that came out to all of the board members. Okay, as to what we should implement, policy 8300. Okay, the only changes on here, and recommendations that were made is that on the mandatory visible display, it's requiring that all 9th graders through 12th graders actually wear them visibly, throughout the day, especially in the hallways and getting into lunch periods and things like that. There was consensus of the committee to allow the kids to put them in their pockets during regular class settings, so that they're not dangling in the neck, but once they're in the hallways and once they're, moving around the building, that they're visible. There was a recommendation, from Ingram and Smith that, in the proposed policy that states for students attending classes 6 through 8, the visible display of identification cards would be at the sole discretion of the building. The committee did not feel that was the appropriate thing to do, but rather to have them follow the same guidelines as the 9th through 12th grade, the high school program. So there was no confusion. So you don't have one school that's doing it and another school that's not, that eventually ends up back in this room where parents are upset that, one school has to follow it and the other one's not. So I think they wanted the consistency of being able to follow the same guidelines as the 9 through 12. That was really the only recommendation. The other recommendation was that it was a very good recommendation was that we don't implement this as a policy until September 1. Rather, because it would be very difficult to implement it as a policy right now with the students being almost all the way through the school year. So that was the other recommendation from this committee. And Patty, if I'm forgetting anything, please.
We would continue the practice because we've already started the practice for all 5 secondary buildings of wearing them. So we'd continue the practice, but it would be a policy in September where there would be discipline attached for lack of following the policy.
Mr. Reynolds,
Yeah,
please.
thank you. I just have one comment. I wasn't able to attend the meeting. I think, Patty, you saw me dialing in and late, but work kept me late. Rob, just one other question under guidelines, right? Second paragraph, student identification card must be presented to any staff member upon request. I just wrote a note. How do we define a staff member? So are we allowing, let's say, a food service worker, custodian to demand an ID from a student, or is it instructional staff? So I just highlighted that. I don't know if that's something.
I think that's something that did come up at the meeting, and it was that in the event of a disciplinary action or a verbal altercation, where a staff member, whether it be a sub, whether it be a TA, an aide, a teacher, could actually execute for their ID to identify who they are for the purposes of dealing with the disciplinary action. But not necessarily, school lunch. One of the things that they talked about is that on the back of the cards would be the barcode, so kids can actually pay for their lunch. And that image, as soon as the image comes up on the screen, so that's the only time that they would use it during school lunch. But
Yeah, just if we can define the staff member versus any other staff member just asking a child for their identification, which may be inappropriate. So that was just
one of the things that we did, I know there was a concern of Mr. Cerny in some of the meetings was we're not going to require it to get on a bus. That there's a list on that bus, and the student's not required to expose their name and their first and last name to a contracted bus driver. So that's not going to be something that's part of the policy. It's just more of moving around the building, okay, for purposes of getting from point A to point B between classes or lunch and things like that. They would not be required to wear it during the ZED. They would not be required to wear it during sporting events. And they were going to be the breakaway language so that you can't injure a kid in the event of a physical altercation.
An example that we spoke about with a staff member asking for the ID would be a security guard asking for that ID. So if a student was doing something and they didn't want to be confrontational with the student, getting their name so they could bring it to an administrator so it wasn't a confrontational situation.
I'll just raise, I'm a little bit concerned by that, Mr. Reynolds, just in terms of adults in the building who are our staff and our professionals who may have to come across an incident where they ask a child for a name or an ID and then, well, this one's on the list, this one's not, or having to come back and add people to the list. I just worry about who we add and who don't, and who we don't, and then what does that say necessarily about that person's role in the district. I think a staff member is our employee, and there may come occasion where we'd have to ask for that. I don't think very often, but I think it could possibly happen. I wouldn't want to be in that gray area, so to speak, but it is something for us to consider and go back and talk about.
Just have the conversation.
Mr. Isonia?
Yeah, I mean, I would think staff as defined would be someone we've issued an ID card, employee ID card to, right? That would be the golden rule. Right? If we issue them an ID card, they're one of our staff, we vetted them, right? We employ them, so that would be the guideline I would use.
So the only thing I would say is, to Mr. Reynolds' point, we do bring contractors into the school and we do issue them ID cards. So if it was a temporary employee, such as a contractor, that, maybe we define, an employee of the district versus a contracted, when I say contracted.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's right. That's right.
Work in the building. You wouldn't want an electrician. Yeah, temporary one.
Are our staff members' badges color coded? They're yellow, right? Like a yellowish color?
No.
Oh, maybe
They used to be. I think the North one used to be gold, right?
Gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all white, just economies of scale instead of buying different colors and things like that, right? With how many we need. My goodness.
So we do issue badges like this to contractors? We do not. Oh, okay. They don't get one of these. Okay. So.
I thought I saw something in one of the contracts
If we had someone here for a long time
A
working on
contractor
something
will
that's
always
in the
wear
building-
their personal ID. So if
Oh,
they're
yeah, they wear their
Acme
own
construction
ID
company,
for a picture.
they'll have their ID. John Jones, Acme Construction.
And actually, there was something in the contract that actually said that if an ID school ID would be granted. So I don't know if it's the temporary that didn't say temporary, it just said school ID would be.
Yeah, I've never given anyone a school ID.
Patty, just a question. It's not something you have to answer tonight, but maybe later. Do we know how the current practice is going with it? Is it problematic? Is it causing more problems than it is? I would hate the again, not to use the COVID stuff, but the cure to the problem be worse than the problem itself.
So there's always going to be resistance because it's something new. It's happening at Seneca, and it's been happening for about a year and a half, and it's very smooth there. If you go to any event, the children use their ID to get in and out of the building. They show their ID. It's not an issue. Mr. Weston spoke that it's not so much resistance of them having their ID, it's getting them in the habit of wearing their ID.
Yeah.
Kids
Is
don't
it-
have a
I
problem
mean,
having their ID.
You've been in both buildings. There's for lack of better words. There's still a fear factor in the middle school of consequence, and at the high school, there's more of a less of that going on. So is it more of a problem at the high school than it is at the middle school? That's my question.
It again, resistance. When I
Yeah.
tried to implement it at the beginning, I had more resistance from adults than I did from the students. Once
Okay.
you make it something a practice and it's just part of their way and their expectations, I don't think we'll have an issue with it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for the committee updates?
Just for clarification, the resistance also was because it wasn't consistent across the
Yeah.
district.
Yep. Good. Yep. Anyone else? Number 13 is our second public comment for non-agenda items. Mrs. LaCourte?
It fell off.
That's all right.
Okay. Wow, what a fabulous school board meeting. This is the way that school board meetings should be. I'd first like to say that, can you hear me well? I don't, okay. Your report was just, I've been to several school board meetings because I do speak at other board meetings, and it was just phenomenal. It was clear, it was concise, it was understandable, and I think you should model that in other school districts like Hvac because it was
Don't tell 'em to
absolutely
model that in other
wonderful.
districts, please.
It was very good. And the fact that we had a mental health person here from Northwell, which my daughter, who was 7 months pregnant when she graduated a year early when I spoke the last time, actually went, because she suffers from bipolar and anxiety and depression, and it took us a long time to actually get her services. And I know the whole medical system with mental health in Suffolk County, which is horrendous because we don't fund it. That's the biggest problem. And to have access to something like that, my daughter actually, because I was persistent, she actually is working for Northwell, and she's doing very well with Northwell. So I think it's fabulous that you bring it in here, and if it is at Gate Lot, that would be fabulous. So I did have a flyer that, did you give it out to everyone? Okay, yeah, so, okay, oh, so they can't see it now? Because I'm going to talk about, yeah,
If I could just offer also, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just it popped in my head. It popped in my head before I lose it. I just want to say that presentation tonight, and there's an FAQ that comes with it, will be put on our website tomorrow, so more folks can look at the presentation and see the FAQ. Thank
it's
you.
so important because that's part of, the mental health of students, especially. I mean, it's difficult being a teenager or going through school and your body changing and all those pressures that you have. But on top of it, that, we have kids that suffer from mental health issues because of social media, because of whatever's going on at home, because of the masks that, the whole, everything that we've gone through has just been horrendous. And the reason, and I'm glad that I came today because all of this ties into this, which is equity. This has to do with equity, being able to give the support to the students to actually succeed in school. So what you're doing is that you're giving the support, like my daughter who was pregnant, she was getting the support that she needed in order for her to excel. And she excelled. She was able to go after she gave birth. She graduated a year early. She got the support from the staff, which in Sachem North, I just absolutely can't speak highly enough. And she was able to continue her education. She wound up getting a very good job in Northwell. And this is part of the success of having equity. Equity in all the schools, as Mr. O'Keefe was talking about, that the fields have to be ADA compliant. That's part of equity. I think this conversation is important to have because there's a population that needs to be educated about what equity is so they can understand that when we lift up the few that need the support, we're lifting everybody up. And what does it do? It makes Sachem a more desirable place to live. And I'm telling you that this is absolutely fantastic. So I had printed this out because I wanted to show the difference, because I think people get confused between equality and equity. And this graph shows exactly what the definition of equity is, where it actually lifts the people that do not have the same starting place, like my daughter, me being a single mom. You know, not everybody has the perfect home or what is supposed to be the perfect home. So with that, I wanted to discuss, I think today was just, I think it was just a great, and this is the way that board meetings should really be run. This was really a wonderful and a pleasant place to be. And I'm so glad that my granddaughter will be coming into the school district. So I'm really happy about that. So I just wanted to address just something small after all the positive praises that I have for the school district. The last board meeting that I came, we talked about not making the school boards political. So as you know, after I spoke, and if you go back through the video, the speaker right after me once again brought up politics, talking about the governor, calling her a psychopath, calling her a witch with a capital B. And as you know, that's not the place for this. You guys, in all honesty, I know that it's a difficult position that you're in. You got to stand up. You got to do your part and just stand up and just say, you know, this is not where we want this. We want to pull the community together, right? You guys are doing a great job. Look at all the things that you're bringing in here. We got to stop the nonsense, and it's up to you guys to just pump the brakes on it and just say, this is not acceptable here. You know, we're professionals. Let's act like professionals. And if people cannot get out of their indignant, their indignant behavior or their reactionary behavior, then, you know, we have to let them know this is not how we run and conduct a school board. We have to be here for the kids. This is about the kids. It's not about their personal feelings. It's about the kids. It's about getting the kids to excel and moving forward and being a productive citizen of society. Like my daughter, she's an example, a really good example of what Sachem can put out. And I think that's important. And I really appreciate all of you, regardless of what political party you belong to, because we all have the kids in mind. Their future is important. And that's what I want to say.
Thank you. There's nothing on for tonight's board discussion. Is there any future board discussion items? Please.
I just want to bring up the 3 to 8 state testing that is back 3 days. I mean, it's no secret that I am not a fan of the 3 to 8 state testing. We always had state testing. I've been in education for 20 years. About 10 to 12 years ago, when Common Core came in, we just saw a huge shift in that type of testing. It's not similar to SAT testing, and because parents will say, that I want them to prepare for these large scale tests. It's a different type of test. The readability is not on grade level. We've been advocating for, masks and no masks, I should say, or parent, choice on those things. For me, it's just that, I was hoping with COVID that we were going to get that chance to refocus, reimagine, take a look at the whole child. And here we are back to taking 3 days of state assessments for math and for ELA. We have, most districts have moved to some local based or decisions of NWEA, iReady, to get more data because parents are opting out of that state test. They trust more the districts of making decisions and gathering data on their students than they do necessarily from just getting a testing company to put out tests that districts have to put out there. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, just a discussion that we could have as a board member that may be reaching out to our state ed department about, better ways to getting the data. I would love to see what data you're actually getting from these state tests versus what we're getting from our classroom teachers and what they're seeing in the classroom, and from our NWA. What is more beneficial and what are we getting more out of? And do we have to continue taking time away from our students and in the time in the classroom to prepare and or give these state assessments?
Please. Thank you, Sabrina.
So I'd also like the board to consider pushing to not have regents in June, to not, to advocate for our students, because, kids have been out all school year. They've been out quarantine, it's not a fair assessment. So I would like to see the regents not happen this June, and maybe start fresh in September for the new school year, moving forward, taking the regents. But I think our kids deserve one more break from the regents in June.
I agree. I wrote that down as my thing, and you got it, which is great. I am all for, and everyone will have a chance to speak, but if we want to write a letter regarding both.
I'm 3 to, I'm an elementary. I fall in that 3 to 8, so I see that. The
Yeah.
Regents is not my.
Yeah, I covered the secondary.
Yeah, but I think we have all seen, all we talk about is learning loss and homework help and Saturday enrichment, and yet we're giving regents exams like the kids have been in school all day and they haven't been quarantined, or they weren't positive, or they didn't miss school.
Yeah.
So I think a letter from us saying that we just don't think it's appropriate
Yeah.
for June, and if they want to start fresh with a full school year for next year, that would be.
Right, and I teach ELA 11, so I'm teaching towards the regents. I also teach special ed ELA 11 that these kids take the regents, and I've had a number of kids out on quarantine, and it's hard enough when they're in school full time with no disruption.
Yeah.
I just don't think it would be fair to make them take it.
And I want to stress, as an educator, we use data to drive our instruction. It's important. So I don't want to say students shouldn't be taking tests. We shouldn't be gathering data. I just think at this point, those assessments particularly, and, again, regents is not my forte, but the 3 to 8, I just don't see the benefit. As an educator, I don't use that data, or I don't even get that data enough or in time to drive my instruction. When my students, we use a different testing versus the NWA, but I get that immediately. I see where my students score. I see their strengths and weaknesses. I can remediate or enrich them right after they finish that assessment or that diagnostic, depending what. The state assessment, again, I'm not on the administrative side to see what data you're getting, but is that data useful to drive instruction programs? Is that useful of what we're getting from the state to help us make decisions in education versus what we're getting from our classroom teachers, who I personally believe is our most valuable resource in driving and coming up with programs and the needs of our students. And I would like to use that versus local assessments of what we need for our local students, not just some broad state test that we just throw out 3 days. All right, you're 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's move on. I just don't see the value in it. I'm not saying we need data. Students need to sit for tests. I agree with that 100%. I'm just not seeing the value in it and how it's benefiting our students and us to make educational decisions for our students.
So if I could jump in for a second, the 3 through 8 tests should have value. They should help us to look at our curriculum, to look at our teaching, it should tell us about our students. It takes so long to get that information that you're getting it by the time the kids are leaving. Now your kids are gone when we're getting that information late June or over the summer at the earliest. Now those kids are gone, and now you have this, right, the child's of 4, and what does that mean? And there is more information certainly than they had in the past, but if we are going to suggest that we don't perhaps utilize 3 through 8 testing or regents, I would say that we could put into this conversation that we start to utilize more local assessments like the NWEA, which is a computer-based assessment that will reach kids at their level, and we get the information back right away. Or teacher-created assessments, end-of-year assessments could work for us. People argue also that you want to look at this past 2 years, now that hopefully we're on the other side of this, and we don't waste that time. We actually look at some things that might actually be a benefit to us, and one of those things might be something like creating our own baseline assessments and things like that. And there has been talk about exploring the regents and perhaps changing them at some point, and maybe, again, now is the perfect time to do that, as opposed to go back to exactly what we used to do before we had the pandemic.
Mike?
So 2 things. One is I think we may have just hit on a topic that we should be discussing with our state people on the 16th, right? The whole statewide testing, the regions, the usefulness of that testing, how that testing is going to be used, and why it's not timely. Although maybe it's got a trend, maybe it's got a benefit in trend analysis. I don't know, but that's one. I think we need to discuss that. So if we can phrase up some questions between Matt and Sabrina, that might be good to talk about on the 16th. The other thing is, Chris, we had talked early in the school year about the Blue Ribbon School. Are we going to lay out maybe we had a discussion about it, but is your intent to lay out a plan on how to achieve or work towards achieving that level? Is that?
That is something that we would certainly be interested in exploring as we move forward. I think the 9-period day and living that for a year would be really helpful to us. Adding those additional AP courses and having additional students in 8th grade in algebra and earth science, offering them more rigorous courses would allow us to look back over what those requirements are for Blue Ribbon and get us going in that direction. I would not want us to jump in just yet until we live that for a year and have some of that data, because I think that would allow us to get to that level.
Mike, just see. Sorry.
Yep, Kedvin.
Just see a point on the Blue Ribbon. I know we had a discussion about that, and really it's contingent to the 3 through 8 tests. Yeah, so if with the number of opt-outs we have in this district, we're never going to succeed, to be able to compete for a Blue Ribbon status unless we address the whole 3 through 8 thing. I know it's a big initiative right now with a lot of different groups, particularly at the Superintendent's Association, is to return local control back to the district. Allow us to be able to determine, okay, how we test our kids and how we access data. Something else that's important. I mean, last couple of years, regents were suspended as a result of COVID. APPR was suspended because of COVID. I mean, this year, they haven't made a determination yet on APPR, but how do we evaluate our teachers based on the number of absences and loss of learning that took place? And if we're going to put a letter together, we probably should bundle that all up so that, we have a new governor and we have, a new administration up there. Maybe we need to look at maybe advocating to return, evaluations, okay, back to the local level where we can actually, put together a plan that truly assesses, the needs and teaching styles of our staff.
We need to start over with APPR,
Yeah.
right? I think everyone would
So if
agree
we're going to bundle
with that.
together in a letter, maybe we should address those 3 issues, which is regents, okay, suspension of regents, as Mr. Bauman said, suspension of 3 through 8 tests, as Ms. Pickwood said, but also hit it and say, listen, let's have a level playing field. Maybe we should throw in there the APPR as well, so that we can have a fresh start with a fresh normal year, and really advocate to kind of bring that back to local.
I've had conversations before with some top state officials around utilizing something again like the NWEA as the state test. I think it would be something that would really benefit our students and our staff, and I'd love to start bringing those conversations back up again now that we are refocused on education. I think it would be really valuable for our kids and our staff to do something along that lines. I'd love to have, perhaps we can invite some state folks to come down as well, and I can work on getting maybe a group of other superintendents to have a meeting where we can get someone down here, meet with us. Again, as we talked about tonight, we're one of the biggest districts on Long Island, but we say should hold some weight. And we have a lot behind us in terms of students and staff, and I think it'd be important. I think we could partner with our friends in the SCTA as well in terms of having some of these conversations. As I see our president sitting out here, as we have these conversations going forward, I'd love to start to revisit those conversations. We need to do a better job when it comes to assessment of our kids and again, evaluation of our staff.
Matt, Vin, and then Jim. Matthew.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say part of that conversation, it would be great to have the educators doing the assessments. And I think anybody in education agrees that these corporate pigs, Pearson and all these other companies, they shouldn't be writing questions for kids. There should be educators making these tests. So that should be part of that whole conversation.
Vinny? Jim, please.
Yeah, I think what's important here with this conversation is what do you administrators think of that, the regents and also the assessments? I mean, I'm not an educator, so I don't know, and I'll take your word for it that they're not really of value. And the regents, I'll also take your word for it that are not your word for it. I know that the kids have had a tough year, and sticking them with regents now is not conducive to success. But I really need to hear it from you, Mr. Superintendent, and our staff here. What do you guys think? Because we write a letter from the board. It doesn't go anywhere. But maybe if the letter is supported by the staff, maybe even the teaching staff, and then it has some muscle.
So I'll jump into that and speak for our staff. No, I'm not going to speak for our staff, but I will say that certainly 3 through 8, we've been trying to fix that one for a long time. And I'm not an advocate of utilizing those assessments. I think it needs to change. The regents are something that we've had for quite some time. They are an exit assessment for our students. And again, given the pandemic and what we've gone through these past few years, I think it's an opportune time to revisit them and see if that is the direction we want to continue to go in. And certainly this year, without that one, we just heard, that was one of the things I picked up I was at a conference in Albany with the commissioner, amongst others, and that was one of the things that they shared with us. That's why it was in the paper, I think, today, that we are going to have the regents this year. And kids are certainly at a disadvantage, some kids more than others. So it is definitely a concern. So if I felt that there was any hesitancy in terms of writing a letter or supporting a letter, I think I would certainly jump in and say that I really appreciate you asking that question. And I don't know if Erin or Kristen or John or Patty want to mention anything also, but I would definitely advocate that we take a look at all of these assessments, these statewide assessments, and certainly revisit them.
So that's a letter that we can put together and get to us, and we can get a read on it and get it out
So,
ASAP.
Mr. Veneto, I don't know if we might borrow you for your letter writing services. Again, did a great job nailing our last one. And I don't know if we were all over the place a little bit, so I'll hone in on some things.
Yeah, I think I got the gist. I might need a little help with some of the educational pieces, but
Sure.
yeah, I can assist.
I was just going to suggest, before we craft that, let's have our thing on the 16th with the state. With, I guess Doug is coming, right? Doug Smith is coming.
Yeah, Doug Smith is confirmed. I think Anthony Picarillo's, I believe, confirmed. Whitman from Town of Islip is confirmed. Caracapa's office, I believe, was sending somebody. So just
Was
I don't have the exact
a
list,
Weeks
but we-
office coming? Is Senator Weeks office somebody coming?
As of now, I don't know.
Okay.
One of the committee members was doing the RSVP.
Because I would be curious on their take of that whole position and then
Well,
reflect that.
we've got state, Suffolk, Town of Islip.
Well, this
Town
would
of
be
Smith
more a state
represented.
issue, right?
Mike, yeah, I'll just jump in just quickly. And I'm not talking for anybody, but I don't think my brother or Nick Caracappa are going to talk about education.
No.
And Andy Whitman is the receiver of taxes for Town of Islip, so I don't think that he has anything to say about it either. Doug would be great, but if everything that we wanted came through Doug, we would get everything that we wanted and more. Our issue is that the Commissioner of Education needs to hear us, and I just wouldn't want to wait to send it to her, because Doug will relay our message, but I think it's got to come from us as well on top of that. It's just my 2 cents. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I don't the county legislature is not going to
Well,
help
I'm
us
just
in this.
He's on the education committee, so I'd want to hear, we present that, you might find out, that's funny, we were just talking about that up in Albany.
Yeah.
So,
And just so you know, my take on the teacher assessments has a lot to do with straining our staff and doing those evaluations. We have to do these evaluations for APPR. Our staff is spending more and more time, in classrooms, doing these, very long write-ups, and is it really the best practice to utilize that time at a time when we're recovering from a pandemic? And that would be my concern of suspending it this year, maybe, advocating to maybe redo it. So it's, once again, it's tailored to the district's needs.
Well said, Mr. Scaro. I will leave it at that. Thank you.
And not to put on the spot that maybe our, SCTA might want to join in and sign on that letter.
If we can get
just string-
three of us could sign, and I think that would hold some weight as well.
Just to say that it's a community thing and that we want changes in education.
Yep.
I don't have any topics. I just want to say I was at the EMF, the Elementary Music Festival with all the schools, elementary. They were amazing. I cried again. I cry at all of them. It's just so beautiful to see them. And that group of kids learned their instrument through the pandemic. So that was just something. And it was awesome. I mean, the orchestra, the choir, everybody, and the teachers, the music teachers, music staff, just amazing. So I just want to, those kids, parents, educators who are involved in that, beautiful.
Anyone else? The next meeting will be on March 23rd here at 7 o'clock. Can I please have a motion and a second to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective negotiations and the lease of real property? Motion by Mr. Isernius, seconded by Mr. Baumann. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Happy International Women's Month and happy St. Patrick's Day.